Good evening. Today is Wednesday, June 25th, 2025. We are at City Hall in the Washington City Council chambers for our regular meeting. All of our meetings are broadcast live on washingtoncity.org/meetings and also archived for later viewing. For our workshop today, we had the opportunity to visit a new Class A office space building and a tenant there, integrated healing centers. It was great. So sometimes we get on site for our workshop meetings. So this is the first meeting of the day in the council chamber. As is tradition in Washington City, we value and appreciate our relationship with the Interfaith Council. The Southern Utah Just Serve directors are here this evening, so I'd invite the Mortensons to come forward. Sid, and if both of you can come forward and speak a little to the council, and if you'll lead us in the invocation.
We are Sid and Janice Mortensen. We do represent JustServe.org, and it's just a community posting board. If you're looking for volunteers for,
Hey, Sid, I'm gonna have you speak in the mic, if you don't mind, and they'll hear.
So anyhow, we're here just representing, if you've got city council members particularly, and you're over the cemetery, you need cleanup projects, you need volunteers, please go to justserve.org, and have you list those, and we do our best to get people to respond and do those. Sand Hollow Reservoir loves having their listing there. They get lots of people, and the judges love to send people there as well. So,
well, we appreciate the service that you provide and that the organization provides. How do they find Just Serve?
JustServe.org, www.justserve.org, or there is a Just Serve app you can put on your phone.
Wonderful.
So for communities, you can list your needs, and for other communities or other things, that's a place for people to go. If you were to go to justserve.org tonight and put in your zip code, you'll find 88 volunteer opportunities within our zip code area. So.
And what does it do for those that are serving with Just Serve? Does it give them any benefit?
I hope that when I die, there is some benefit there.
So. Well, it makes a difference in the community. We appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you very much. Our Father, which art in heaven, we gather here this evening and bow our heads in grateful prayer for the privilege we have of living in this great land, for the freedoms we enjoy, for the opportunities that are ours. Father, we gather here with many faiths and beliefs, but united in our goals of self-government, honest representation, freedom, and equality for all. Father, we ask that at the beginning of this city council meeting for a blessing of harmony and goodwill. We ask for a blessing to be with those who conduct on our leaders of this great city, that they might be inspired as they strive to lead and do according to the will of our fine citizens and the good of our community. We ask for a blessing that will be with all those that participate in any way in this meeting, that they may do their parts and express themselves and their thoughts in a way to be best understood and fitting for this occasion. We ask a special blessing to be upon the people of Pine Valley and the firefighters that are doing their best to protect them and protect lives and property at this time. Father, as we live also in this arid community, we ask that we'll be mindful and bless us with the rain that we may need to carry us through this season. We ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you both. Councilman Henderson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please repeat the pledge after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I call for a motion to approve the agenda, I'll make note that we do have need to go to closed session for item 12A and 12C, which are purchase, exchange, or lease of property and character or professional competence of an individual. That said, I'll call for a motion on the agenda.
So moved, Mayor.
Have a motion by Councilman Coates to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second by Councilman Belliston. All in favor?
Aye.
We can start now. For announcements, the city offices will be closed on Friday, the 4th of July, in observance of Independence Day. And it's tradition annually to celebrate what we call 4th of July in the park here at Veterans Park. So I'll just briefly give a rundown of those, some of those events. At 7 a.m., there will be a breakfast cooked by the Lions Club down at the pavilion. At 8 a.m., we'll have music by the Nyson Band. At 9 a.m., we'll have a special statue unveiling, and that will be of who is often called Mr. Washington. It's for Quentin Nyson, and the pedestal is in place, and he'll be standing right across from his home and the old Quentin's Merc, right there at the entrance to the old school that is now a museum. At 9:30 a.m., we'll have a kids carnival. At 10 a.m., there'll be the traditional foot races. And if you stay past 11, it's too hot, so go home. Before I ask the council, are there any other announcements that I may have missed? Seeing none, I'll just take a minute, and this doesn't do it justice by any means, but for the last 18 years, we have had a remarkable individual serving this community as the Community Development Director. And he has he's done what I've called laid a great foundation for the direction that Washington is going and for where we are today. And so, Drew, I know you're one that does a lot of work. You are not weary in all the work that you do, but a lot of that's back in your office and early and late, and you've put your heart and soul into this, and so many nights at plan commissions and city council meetings. And so, as someone who has served with you for many of those years and learned land use under your hand, it's just we want to thank you and recognize you at what will be your last meeting here.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I hope you got me emotional, and that's takes a bit, for me sometimes. But I appreciate that. It means a lot. I was just telling Councilman Henderson, I remember when I came here, I just happened to look up and there was an opening in Washington City for a city planner, and I walked in and they basically rolled out the red carpet. They told me later, it had been 7 months. That position had been open and nobody had come through the door in 7 months. So I walked in, 15 to 20 minutes later, I walked out with the job, and I was going to start 2 weeks after that. And it's been great ever since. So, and again, I've worked with some fantastic people and some great councils and great mayors. It's been a joy and a pleasure and a privilege to be associated here. And this is a great city, and it's on its way. And I thank you all for that. Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate your work. How about a round of applause for Drew Ellerman? There are not many projects within this city that your hands haven't touched, that your eyes haven't reviewed, and your words haven't counseled the Plan Commission and the council on making sure that it aligns with our code and with the general plan and all of these things. So we really appreciate you. I will make note for those in attendance, for all of those who are also listening, right here in the council chamber on Friday, June 27th at 11 a.m., we will have an open house to come and recognize Drew and interact with him. And so any of you that are available to do that, come wish him the best. And I know we had a good conversation about a lot of plans he has for these next chapters. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is declarations of abstentions and conflicts. Council, does anyone have a declaration of an abstention or conflict? Seeing none, we'll move right on to the consent agenda, which consists of approval of the minutes from the City Council meeting of June 14th, 2020. 25. I'll call for a motion on that item.
I can approve the consent agenda for our June 25th regular council meeting.
You've heard Councilman Ivy's motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Casperson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved unanimously. Item 5 is appointment. This is consideration to confirm the appointment of members of the Plan Commission. Council, you've read my memo, and my recommendation, with your advice and consent, is to reappoint Planning Commissioner Corey Anderson for an additional 3-year term, and to move Commissioner Merrill Davis from the alternate role to fill the remainder of the term vacated by Commissioner Doug Schill. And that's my recommendation. I'm happy to entertain any discussion on that and or motion.
Mayor, will you be finding anyone to replace Merrill Davis in his alternate role?
Yeah, so as I put in the memo there, the notice will go out in the newsletter for July. The applications for a new plan commissioner will close at the end of July, and with the advice and consent of the council, it will be my privilege to make that appointment. And I anticipate having that individual fill the remainder of Commissioner Davis's role. So the math actually works with 3-year terms and 6 individuals, but sometimes they get appointed to fill the remainder of someone else's term as the chips fall.
Mayor, those are both great commissioners. They both bring a lot to the table and really do a good job on the planning commission, so I support that.
I'm happy to entertain a motion to that end. Councilman Henderson, I know you have that assignment. Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Sure. I'll make a motion, Mayor, that we confirm the appointment of the members to the planning commission.
A motion by Councilman Henderson,
Second.
second by Councilman Coates. All in favor?
Aye.
And that is approved unanimously. And again, as I said in the memo, once we receive those applications, council, I'm going to distribute those to you for review. And I also anticipate giving those applicants an opportunity to speak before the council, so we can all kind of vet that position. It's an important role, especially considering that by ordinance now they're also part of the land use authority. So some of the decisions that they make are more permanent than just a recommending body. So appreciate your support there, council.
Mayor, I have a quick question on that. Are you going to have them speak and then we're going to be able to think about it to our following meeting?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just 'cause this is the first time we meet some of these individuals and you don't know much about them and it's hard to do it in their 2-minute conversation. So.
Exactly. And councilman, we've had that conversation and we've found that's kind of been the best practice, is that we review those applications, we invite them, we give them 2 or 3 minutes in front of the council, and then we'll have that further conversation, and that will give me an opportunity to receive the advice from the elected body. Okay, item 6, public hearings. For the public hearings, we did receive one online comment that was not related to item 6A or 6B, but I will just make note of the fact that we did receive online public comment, but it was not specific to either of these items, but the council has received and read that comment. It was with respect to vacation rentals. Item 6A, this is a public hearing and consideration to approve a resolution opening and amending the 2024-2025 fiscal year budget. Finance Director Brian Brown will present to the council on this item. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is the last budget amendment for fiscal year 25. And as you can see here, our current budget is 137 million, and we're moving, this budget amendment is for 144 million. The main increases for this is there's a increase for 3 million increase for expenses for grant expenses, but there's also a revenue tied to that. So we received 3 million in revenue as well, but we need to record the revenue expense in this budget to wrap up this year. And then the other major adjustment here is 4.8 million, and that was for rollovers from projects that were started last year and they're finishing up this year. Like I talked to Andy today in Public Works, and he said the jet truck they ordered in 2021 is expected to be here in '24, and it showed up just recently. They didn't know if they'd receive it this year or not, so we had to put that in the budget as well. So those are the main reasons for this budget adjustment. Do you have any questions regarding this budget adjustment?
Council, you approve and oversee this budget. What questions do you have for the finance director?
Maybe if you could just talk about the capital projects, I'm having a hard time finding exactly what capital projects are.
So the capital projects in here, there's the UDOT SR7, and then the Long Valley Tank. Those would be the two capital projects that were included in this budget amendment.
Well, that's a great project, or a great budget. Those are important capital projects. We see the other in the packet there. I'm also really pleased with the activity that the staff has done in seeking grant funding. That's something that we historically haven't done, and so it's nice to see that we can account for grant revenue, and I understand also that we have to offset that with an expenditure, or at least a budgeted expense. So that's good news to me, and it makes sense to me also that we're rolling those capital projects forward. Council, further questions for Brian and or discussion amongst the council? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve a resolution opening and amending the 2024-2025 fiscal year budget.
It's a public hearing. Right?
Oh, thank you, Councilman Belliston. Yes, thank you, Brian. I am going to thank again Councilman Belliston for keeping me on track. This is a public hearing. Whenever we open the budget or amend the budget like this, we do have to have a public hearing. Would anyone like, I'm going to officially open it now and invite anyone who would like to speak on this item to come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and now I will call for further discussion and or a motion on this item.
Mayor, I'm happy to make that motion that we approve a resolution opening and amending the 2024-2025 fiscal budget.
Thank you, Councilman Belliston. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Coates with the second there. Let's go roll call, beginning with Councilmember Belliston.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
Ivy. Casperson.
Aye.
And that is approved 5-0. Next item, 6B. This is a public hearing and consideration to approve an ordinance to repeal and replace Washington City Code Section 8-1-7, abatement of dangerous buildings. Is Thad in the house?
I don't know where he is, which is surprising, but
So
maybe we can
we'll
move
just,
on to other items.
yeah,
at a different
we'll
time.
just put that one on pause for right now, unless he's in the on-deck circle and ready to get in the box. But it's possible that he's still in the dugout. We're going to circle back to that with your blessing, council. We'll go on to item 7A. This is consideration to approve conditional use permit C-25-04 for 2 new commercial buildings located at 135 West Buena Vista Boulevard. The applicant, Nathan Coombs, representing the applicant, and Community Development Director Drew Ellerman will present on this item. Mr. Ellerman.
It's kind of great how that worked out my last meeting, and Elvin's on vacation, so I get to give some reports finally again.
One last circle.
One last hurrah. So thank you, Mayor. As stated, the applicant's requesting approval of a CUP to build 2 new commercial buildings located approximately 135 West Buena Vista Boulevard. Commercial developments along Buena Vista Boulevard require a conditional use permit approval. Building A, as you see on your plan, is approximately 6,000 square feet. This will have part of the building, a quick serve drive-through, and also outdoor patio space. And right next to it, Building B is approximately 5,080 square feet with an outdoor patio space, and each building provides space for up to 3 tenants. So that's a possibility of 6 possible different businesses within that. The tenants are unknown at this time, and the proposal includes 5,540 square feet of restaurant and 5,540 square feet of retail, which requires at that in the parking standard 60 parking spaces. The applicant is providing 66, which again meets that requirement on the parking. Also, just to add on to that, with the Winco approval recently, they have 108 extra parking stalls that they just had in there, so we've got plenty of parking for these facilities. As shown in the exhibit, the tallest portion, and let me slide that over. And the one's not focusing in, but we'll zoom in on here. The tallest point of both these buildings will be 26 feet in elevation off the ground. Exterior materials include metal paneling, brick veneer, and stucco finishes. Landscaping improvements are shown and will be a nice addition to this particular development. Future buildings on this site will be required to receive conditional use permit approval as well. For when we did approve Winco, if you looked off to the east, there was a few more buildings that'll come toward the light and where it meets Main Street there, and they'll come in at a future date. The parcel is zone C2. The surrounding zoning is PCD, which is the Brio PCD to the north, C2 to the east, C2 to the west, which is the Boilers Park, and to the west of the I-15 is on the south of this particular parcel. Staff's reviewed the proposal and finds it meets the standards outlined in the zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at their meeting last week, and they recommended approval of C-25-04 based on the findings, subject to the conditions. And now with that, the Planning Commission added an extra condition as they looked over the elevations, and I'll kind of get to these two. I'll just bring these up a bit. They were kind of concerned because these are the street views on Buena Vista, and they felt like they wanted to add just a little more pop, so they put in a condition number 15. 3 awnings shall be added to each of these buildings that face the Buena Vista Boulevard and match the awnings that are around the front on the building. So there'll be these particular awnings. You can see they're probably like those flat metal that have openings with the rods that hold them in place, and that'll kind of dress up that backside. And the applicant said they'd be willing to do that. So with that said, Council, I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have on this proposed CUP for these 2 commercial buildings.
Questions for the Community Development Director? Questions for the applicant? I have a question, Mr. Coombs. Come on forward. I'm going to make a comment first, and then just a quick question for you. But we used to, as the city, we had contracted with a couple of architects from the south, and they came and visited Washington, which is the south of Utah, a few times. But we got a kick out of what they said, that we believe in God, country, and good architecture. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, he's got it right up there in number 3.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you. So,
Did they teach you that in all of that school that you have to go to?
Sure, yeah.
My real question is, just your feedback on the Planning Commission's recommendation to dress up the rear of those buildings with some awnings?
Yeah, I mean, we have no exception to that. I think it'd be a nice addition to that. You know, they did talk about additional signage on there, which would be controlled by the ordinance as well. But yeah, no problems with that.
Okay.
Mayor, I have a question. I don't know if it needs to be for the architect, but just in reading the project flow card notes, our engineer asked the question just to make sure that Brio Parkway is wide enough. I'm not exactly sure the depth of that question or that concern, but that's something that probably needs to be at least introduced tonight to make sure that that's not something down the road that is a concern that wasn't addressed. complete all along their frontage with,
Vista Boulevard. I will second that, Mayor.
You've heard the motion in its entirety from Councilman Ivy and the second by Councilman Coates. Let's go roll call on this particular item, beginning with Councilmember Henderson, Coates, Ivy, Casperson, and Belliston. That is approved unanimously. Thank you. I'm going to start my watch for 10 to 11 weeks. We're really excited for this project. And thanks for your excellent work. This has been a great partnership. Let's finish up conditional use permits and we'll go to 7B. This is consideration to approve a conditional use permit C-25-05 for a performance fitness located at approximately Washington Fields Road and Hayfield Drive. The applicant is Chris Patton, and the Community Development Director, Drew Ellerman, will present to the council on this item. Mr. Ellerman.
Thank you, Mayor. Applicant is requesting a CUP to build, as stated, a performance fitness center at this location. Commercial developments along Washington Fields Road also require CUP approval. As shown in the exhibit, the building is approximately 9,760 square feet on the main floor, with another 9,723 feet on the second floor, for a combined total of 19,479 square feet. The proposed building meets the minimum setbacks of 20 feet on street frontage, 10 foot on the rear and any sides. And the height on this proposed building is well under the commercial maximum. This one will be at roughly 38 feet in height. The requirements for the C1 zone have that within it. The proposed includes a landscape plan, and I'll slide over to that and see if it'll pick that up, but yep. It's right across from the junction right now, so the exterior materials include stucco, and I'll just kind of get over into here. It includes stucco, metal paneling, and wood accents. 6-foot high privacy fence is required along the southeastern border line due to the adjacent zoning of A20. And the applicant is showing also the privacy wall to the south as well due to the site distance requirements, though, and to match the junction development, there will be a 42-inch high wall as part of that frontage on this, but they'll have to cut it short because of the site distance. Let me pull that up for you. As all of us have been out on this road, it's got quite a bend to it. And so as they went out and measured everything, this particular area that you see in this grayish zone will have to be left open and unblocked with anything to be able to have that sight distance down the road for cars pulling out onto the road. So applicants aware of that, and they've planned that with their landscaping project and the walls that are going in, et cetera. So that's taken care of to cover that particular portion of this project. This will be the third location in southern Utah for performance fitness, and they are proposing one parking space for every 238 square feet of building, which is in line with our business and office retail use of our parking ordinance. Now, the performance fitness location in Hurricane provides one for every 200 square feet, and the one in St. George provides one for every 293 square feet. The applicant has noted the parking for these established buildings are effective and even overparked at these other two locations, even during peak hours. Parcel itself is Zone C1. Surrounding zoning is C1 to the north and west, with A20 agricultural 20 acre to the east and south. Staff has reviewed the proposed project and finds that it meets the standards as outlined in the zoning ordinance. Planning Commission reviewed this request last week at their meeting, and they unanimously recommended approval of C-25-05 based on the findings and subject to the conditions and that was passed on to you, the city council. I'll be glad to answer any questions the council has on the Pro Fitness proposal here along Washington Fields Road.
Council, you've read through the packet, you've heard the summary. Any questions for staff or the applicant?
So Drew, I'm assuming that Washington Fields Road will be widened at that location? John?
Pretty
shakes his
sure,
head.
John, yeah, like I said, I think it's gone through, aware that they'll have to put the finished product on it.
And then the other question I have, is there a plan for a future light at Hayfield Drive? Because that bend is really hard to turn left.
We just didn't want to get too comfortable tonight. John, Inky, good to see you again. It's been like one item, now you're back up.
It's just that road bends really back. I mean, the sight triangle's there, but I've turned there lots of times and it's hard to see clear back right.
Yeah,
It's,
this intersection and Weatherby Way are actually in the current master plan for future signals once warranted. So,
Council, would you like to hear from the applicant? Otherwise, I'm happy for you to have discussion amongst yourselves or make a motion on this one.
I'll make a motion if no one, I think this is a good project. I'll make a motion to approve the conditional use permit C-25-5 for Performance Fitness located at approximately Washington Fields Road and Hayfield Drive.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Casperson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Belliston. We'll go roll call on this, beginning with Councilmember Coates.
aye.
Ivy, Casperson, Belliston,
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
That is approved unanimously. Let's circle back to item 6B. This is a public hearing and consideration to approve an ordinance to repeal and replace Washington City Code, Section 8-1-7, abatement of dangerous buildings. City Attorney Thad Sigmuller.
Thank you, Mayor. With your permission, I'll go ahead and just remain seated here.
Please.
I want to pull up for the council to view the current city code section so that they're aware of what's being proposed to be changed with what they have in the packet. So I've brought up on the screen City Code Section 8-1-7, Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings. You'll see here, it's one of our shorter code sections. I think that might just be one sentence, well, two, I guess. So it says the current Uniform International Code for Abatement of Dangerous Buildings, which has been adopted by the state for use in the state, is hereby adopted by the city. And then the second sentence mentions how many copies. This is a good example where a recent occurrence and a reference to the city code helped us realize that the state no longer adopts that code section and that it needed modernization. And so what you have before you is a modernization. Unfortunately, it's from 2 sentences to about 10 pages. But that is an improvement over what we currently have, as that reference to the state law is no longer a reference that has any content behind it. And then I won't take us to what's in your packets, but I'm going to pull it up on my iPad here and just ask if the council wishes to review it, has any questions or any clarity as to what the intent is there.
You've heard the city attorney, council. Would you like to, in how much depth would you like to review this essentially new ordinance with the city attorney?
I'm assuming staff has reviewed it and understand everything that's in it and addresses our concerns with some of the problems we've had.
That is correct. The building director, Mike Haycock, myself, the city manager, and others have been in a little bit of a ad hoc committee through this and looked at the content. The essence of the new code is to provide code references that reference existing state code and that also provide a process as well as a due process for the landowners for buildings that might be deemed to be dangerous or uninhabitable by the city, and create a process that the city must follow and that landowners can expect be followed for their property.
The overarching thought of this ordinance is safety, right? It's just about being able to abate homes, be able to handle them in a legal way that everyone understands, probably brought about by some recent events in Washington that we're all aware of. And I'm glad that you worked so quickly to get this in place. You know, we take property ownership and citizens' rights very seriously, but when it affects the health, safety, welfare of the entire city and county and state, country and all that, then we sometimes have to act. And I think this is reasonable as I read through it. Certainly not an attorney, but it seems like it's fair, but yet it has what we would need as a city to be able to enforce if we ever needed to.
Well said, Councilman. Further discussion, interaction with the city attorney? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody wishing to make comment on the item of repealing and replacing the Washington City Code, Section 8-1-7, abatement of dangerous buildings. Please come forward now and speak to this item. Seeing none, I will close the item and turn to the council for appropriate action on item 6B.
Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve an ordinance to repeal and replace Washington City Code Section 8-1-7, abatement of dangerous buildings.
You've heard the motion by Councilman Belliston. Is there a second?
Aye, second.
Councilman Coates as second on this particular item. And we'll go roll call on the vote to approve item 6B, beginning with Councilmember Ivy.
Aye.
Casperson. Belliston.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Coates. That item is approved unanimously. Moving right along. Thank you, Thad, by the way. I worry that sometimes we take your talent and skill and your care for this city a little bit for granted. So thank you for your excellent work on essentially building an ordinance worthy of our city. So
You're welcome.
item 8A is consideration to approve an ordinance for zone change Z-25-16 to update the existing PUDC and PUDR located at 1075 East Telegraph Street. The applicant is Turner Farm Phase 1 LLC. Community Development Director Drew Ellerman.
Thank you,
Take it
Mayor.
away.
Appreciate that. The applicant is requesting approval of the conceptual plan for design and use of 24.53 acres of a currently zoned PUDR property, along with relocating 4 acres of commercial property. And I'll just kind of bring this particular map up. Originally, the project was given PUD R and C approval with an area right up here on Bullock and 1100 East being set aside for some commercial. They were trying to maybe get the post office there. Things didn't work out. So they're going to relocate the acreage from there and put it down along the Telegraph portion of the commercial property. And so just to point that out, that's part of this zone change request as well. The surrounding zoning of the parcel is PUDR to the north, R3 to the east, PUDR to the south, and R18 to the west. The development is laid out in an effort to blend the development into surrounding areas. For example, the existing R18 over here on the west side of existing subdivisions, the proposal is trying to put in some 8,000 in the high 7 lots that are going to be close to that, kind of mirror that as part of this, and that's the Pod 2 section of this proposal. On the north end, there went into some patio and some townhomes, kind of matching up over in this corner with the Bluffview townhomes up above it on this particular area. Pod 1 of the proposed development, we'll kind of zoom down there on that. will be a build-to-rent product of 135 units, and that is located over a 11.38 acre area. This will give an 11.9 dwelling unit per acre ratio, which fits in the medium-high density category of our general plan. Pod 1 incorporates 60 single-family, single-story, two-bedroom units, along with 75 two-story, three-bedroom units. So they'll have a mix throughout this Pod 1. The layout of the single and the two-story units will provide a character to the development by breaking up that horizontal view of not just one straight line. It'll help break that up between 1 and 2 stories, giving it some character there. The city code requires 15 foot between two-story units, and the distance between units 60 and 63 and 54 and 57 are 12.11 feet. And so they're just asking for a little relief on there that we've given in others in the past, and just pointing that out on those particular units. Also, the city is also able to approve through this, as stated, an alternate setback. The required parking for Pod 1 is providing 331 spaces. The proposal is required 331, and they are providing 332. So parking meets the requirements there as stated in our parking standards. Amenities for Pod 1 include a dog park, a putting green, a clubhouse outdoor area, a splash pad, a pool area, barbecue area, and ball courts, a pickleball court, as you can see, that are laid out throughout the project here, pretty much as the entrance as you come in. And those will be, again, meeting that requirement for the amenities on the multifamily. Pod 2 of this proposed includes 42 traditional single-family homes and single-family lots, and also this area that they're referring to as next-gen housing. And the next-gen portion is providing two-car garages, and they'll have, which will be a minimum of 20 foot deep. Also on the regular lots, the standard single-family lots, they are going to meet, it's 59 homes, I lost my place on the printout, 59 homes on an area covering 13.15 acres. And the dwelling unit per ratio on that is 4.9 per acre, which falls within the low density designation. So due to the location of the amenity, staff was concerned that the amenities could be pushed to the end of development, which the applicant will need to coordinate with staff to make sure this does not happen. With Pod 2 being traditional lots and the next gen homes providing private backyard areas, staff feels comfortable with the amenities being completed a little bit maybe farther in the stage than we normally do at the 25%, but that's totally up to council how they want to provide that for the amenities on the single-family lots. Northwest corner development, lots 126 and 127.
Can I stop you? What amenities are on the single-family lots?
They're going to be provided down. If we scroll down, they're down here in Pod 3. They're going to tie all this together, but they're not going to get into Pods 6 and 7 and 5 right now, because they're going to want to continue to grow Pod as long as they can on that business. So that was the concern, is that Pod 3 is way down here. That's supposed to be the amenity area for single-family lots and these other 3 portions of the development, and that was the concern.
So is there I know other times we put up, if it's infrastructure, we have to put up a bond or some sort. Is that an option?
And that could be an option. We'll, have you talk to the applicant.
Okay.
And then there's lots of options here, I think, so.
Thank you.
And just to point up here, and the other that makes this unique on lots 126 and 7, this area is within the subdivision has just been labeled a spring. And if you know the Turner property, there is a live spring there. That's where they get most of their water to do the sod farm. So They're right now working with some professionals on trying to get that located, about how they can get more capping and control on that, and be able to push it in different ways and still use it. So right now, they're just going to leave this open until that comes back with a design from that information gathering they're doing right now, trying to find a way to control that spring and put a cap and maybe some control on that. So we just want to make you aware of that, and so that'll come. More than likely, it could just end up being a nice landscaped area. It'll still be a spring because they'll still want to use it and utilize it in irrigation, et cetera, for lots of the project that is to come, let alone continue it for the sod farm that is existing. So just want to make you aware of that. Also, they're asking for some setback conditions on here, as you can see in your report. On typical setbacks, you can see they've given you basically a rectangle squarish lot. And normally it would be 20 foot in the front, 10 on the sides, and 10 in the rear on these single-family lots in a PUD. They're actually asking that the side be broken up to be a 10 on one and 5 on another, but there will always be a 15-foot separation between homes. So if one person takes the 10, the next one can put a 5 there, but if just the opposite of that, but there will always be 15 feet in between, so. But also on that, they are asking for, looks like to have a 10-foot to the buildings, and in the front yard setback, 10-foot to building, livable, but still maintain a 20-foot to the garage for that, so that it'll be a driveway parking area. So that is an ask that they're going through for the PUD.
Drew, is that a condition then? It's already on?
And where's all the text that shows all these setbacks and things you want to do on the PUD?
Can you speak? I didn't hear.
All right, where's all the text that shows requirements? Didn't see that.
It was in the print.
Oh, that.
Setbacks, but for on the lot setbacks. Okay, never mind.
One on the multifamily they're asking for, which is the minimum 15 foot. They want to go down to the 12, 11 on that with the 2-story buildings. These single-family lots, they want to follow this diagram that you have in part of that, your report. And that's what you'd be voting on that as well.
But the asterisk says they can go up to 10 feet on the building, on the front, right?
That's what the diagram is based. It's, clean it up a little bit. That's kind of what that's asking for.
Oh, I see.
So I would just make, if it's not, because I've been looking through that, I would just say that whoever makes a motion, if you feel like approving, I would just add the condition that they follow the diagram as presented in your report, if that's what you feel inclined to add to that. Now, I will just point out that we've had a few of these asked, and there's been a little concern with some of the departments in the city about that, because that's right on that 10-foot, the edge of the 10-foot public utility easement. And I know the power department at certain times, if they have a switch box there, they're supposed to have a minimum of clear 10 feet. And if that switch box is sitting back 3 or 4 feet in the PUE because of layout, and it gets tight for them being on that, it only ends up being 6 or 7 feet on the back half of that. That would be the only concern where that, one of those particular fixtures might be in a particular road when people are asking for that 10-foot to the livable area. So, but with that said, finishing up the report, the Planning Commission reviewed this last week. They had a unanimous recommendation to approve Z-25-16 for the zone change request on here as stated in your report and on the exhibits. They made a motion, and you can use this or however you feel, but I don't know if you've read their motion, but with that approval, they had an extra condition. The amenities of Pod 1 shall be completed before 51% of Pod 1 building permits are issued, and 7,600 square feet of that amenity area shall be completed in Pod 2 before 51% of Pod 2 building permits are issued. So they gave a little time in Pod 1, and they're stating, which is, Pod 1 is the townhome project, that it shall be completed before they move past 51% of building permits issued, that they'll have to have completed.
Usually we've been around 33%.
And 25 to 33, yeah. So that's just what the ask was by the applicant. This is what the planning commission proposed, to the city council, but also for the other amenity area, that they were willing to work a little bit, but they said that you'll only be able to get 51% of the building permits issued up here in this Pod 2 of this Phase 1. And then you had to work and get down and get those going down in the south area. So that could hold up building permits up here. They could end up building out half of it if they wanted to maintain the sod farm for years to come.
Drew, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, but how do we provide a Pod 3 amenity? How do they access that from, Pod 2 if they're still farming? If the sod farm is still operational.
That was, it was hard to follow where they were going with all that.
It just doesn't seem conducive for use.
It's hard because that's the one thing, I think they were trying to help the applicant, but. Just from a logic standpoint, it's. No, the only thing, what I thought when that all happened is that they're gonna have to start pushing Pod 6 or any of these and just have a roadway that the people could literally drive down and sidewalks to that roadway to get down to Pod 3, when that comes. But that's gonna be a hard make on that, so.
Drew, can I ask a question? So are we just approving these Pod 1 and Pod 2 with the more developed site plan?
On the north end of Bullock.
We're just looking at the north end, right?
That's it. The rest of these will come in at the commercial piece, and the other Pods 3, 5, 6, and 7. 4 was accidentally left out, if you're wondering.
With streets being fully improved?
I'm pretty sure that was I'm getting a nod from both Matt and John that was the.
I'd like to hear from the applicant when he's ready. I want to make sure that Bullock is getting improved fully, because it is a master plan. They should build the master plan.
It is a master planned road, yeah.
Typical or if you're up against different property owners, so.
Already stated on there, I think it'd probably be wise to put it on there as a condition, so. Because that is what our code reads. If it is master planned, you've got to build out the whole road, so. So sorry about all that. But there's a lot going on here, but if you have any questions, which we've already asked, I'm glad we did when we did, so.
Further questions for staff? Councilman Bellison?
Yeah, Drew, we're not, just to be clear and kind of expand on what Councilman Henderson was saying. Pod 1 and Pod 2, these other pods that are coming in where they're showing densities and whatnot, we're not approving those densities until that project comes up, right?
The ones that are south of Bullock will come at a later date. Yeah, you're not approving that right now. You're basically, we moved the commercial out of there down, that piece, we want to make sure that was part of this particular application. Then we're just voting on up here Pods 1 and 2.
Jeremy?
His question though, Drew, is the densities, because those densities weren't approved with the last exhibit.
Yeah, when it came through on the zoning side, we just approved PUD commercial and PUD residential, right? We didn't approve any overarching densities on the different parcels. This is going those in those areas saying, hey, we're asking for 16 per acre, 11 per acre, whatever the case may be. I'm not real comfortable approving that today. I want to see the project, like a normal PUD, bring the project in, and then we'll approve the densities of that.
I think they can make the case that they would have those densities, like Councilman Bellison is saying. We'll let the applicant address that.
We'll bring up the applicant, I think, because that's probably a real good question, that would not be, especially if you're not comfortable with it. I don't think they'd like to put it off. I think they'd probably like to get, but we'll ask the applicant come up and we'll drill down on that. here in a minute unless you had any more questions for me.
More questions for staff? I do have one question, and then you may have some thoughts, but we'll let the applicant or the applicant's representative address it too. And I gotta be honest, for the most part, I really like this. I mean, I think there's some work to do with, figuring out the timing and the amenities and some of those things, but those should be worked through. I think, and this is something that I brought up last time it was here, and first of all, with all respect to the farming operations that's been here for generations and that does a great job. At some point, when that business transitions from a farming operation that uses a lot of their water that they own into a housing operation, in some areas, development brings the water with them. In Washington County, you purchase with impact fee your water right. I just want to know what conversation has been had to this point in terms of as they transition from a farming operation that requires that spring water and those other water, if there's been conversation with the city to sell their water to the city as they go, or at some point. It just seems that if we're, farming operations take water that they've been able to have their own and use. But when you're having a development and a subdivision operation, it also takes water, and we have it there. It just seems that there ought to be some sort of a fair transition of that because that water is still needed for housing that was used for. What's the conversation been to this point on that?
Well, I'm probably going to turn that. Lester's here, thank goodness, and John. I don't know which one of you, John, Lester, or Matt. Matt wants to speak.
Matt
for both.
Lou,
That's good.
I'll invite the applicant's representative to come forward. We know you, Matt. Welcome to
Mayor, council
welcome to
members.
what is not your first council meeting by any means. It's good to see you tonight.
I think I've done maybe 2 or 3 of these.
But it is, well, maybe your last one here, but you're not completely out of the game, Drew.
No, I won't be out of the game. Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Appreciate the time. There is, again, a lot going on, and there's some interesting business structures currently with, I'll just call this Pod 1, which is Pod 1 and Pod 2. Let's go with the water discussion first, and then we'll work our way through other questions that council might have. The Turners, as well as the consultant, has also met with the Washington Water Conservancy District to also kind of get some guidance from them on how to best look to this water asset that they have for a future. Meeting with Zach Renstrom, he did basically said, hey, go visit with the city. We'll work with the city and make sure that the city is kind of in the driver's seat.
I think as a city, we would be a willing buyer at fair market price because, we have a responsibility to provide water for development, just as, if you're running a farming operation, it requires water to water the crops.
And I think as far as the owners and, any future development on this project, that is exactly where we're heading, with what that looks like and how that is handled or resolved at the end of the day. Obviously, they've got several years ahead of them still to do farming and do sod on the lower portion of this property. But again, the family as well as the developer is open to having that discussion as we kind of get more, drilled down on what this project will look like and what we can do to kind of, make things all work that makes sense for the family as well as the city. So that's definitely.
Can you tell us a little bit more? I appreciate, and I know this family, and they're wonderful. Can you just tell us a little more, willing to have the conversation? What does that look like in your opinion? I know you're just representing it. What does that look like, and what kind of a timeline would we expect to have that conversation? And at what point do we say we really need to have that conversation throughout this entitlement process?
Yeah, I think as far as having the discussion, that can happen as soon as possible. Obviously, with everything else going on, the actual development, market will tell on how long that would be developed and how long it'll take to get that developed. So that's kind of the unknown as far as timing, like a hard timing. But as far as conversations of when we get to a point, whatever that point is determined by both groups, then we can get to a solution or to a conclusion on how the water is handled. So I think, like I said, I think that discussion can be had, as soon as. And then what are the parameters on triggering, when is that going to happen? Do we develop, 50% of the entire 95 acres? And then it's, is it 50% of the water? We're not sure what that looks like. And I think that's why it's important to have the discussion sooner than later.
Good answer. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Questions? Let's start anywhere and just go from there.
Just confirming that you're building the entire road, full width.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Bullock.
That's great.
Yeah.
Just the phase lines are shown down the middle of the street.
Yeah,
so
there's
I
no,
just wanted-
just again, I guess it's just a kind of a common development structure where you take half of the road.
I understand that. I just wanted to confirm because we just don't want half-built roads. And then
Yes.
for 15 years, while they finish their sod operations, we don't have a fully functional road. And it is a master plan community, so you got to build your roads. And we've had master plan communities, not saying you guys, where the developer says they're going to build it and then they start selling off parcels and don't build the main roads.
Yeah.
So
No,
it's
that's
critical.
a good concern. So the question that we would have, and this is something that we could probably appreciate some guidance from council, with the road being what it is, I mean, are we looking at complete asphalt, curb, gutter, sidewalks on both sides, or asphalt on the side that's currently not being proposed tonight, and completely have the road section asphalted? And maybe, I don't know, maybe a curb? I'm not sure what.
I
we could
envision
do.
full road all the way.
Yep,
That's the question I asked, and I'm assuming it's for both pod 1 and 2 at the same time.
yeah, correct.
So, but
Correct.
that's how I envisioned it with a full built road.
Okay.
So
And then more clarity on the, I'm gonna call it the south side. What does that finish look like,
a
Councilman?
full road, curb, gutter, sidewalk is how I'm asking the question. If there's something different, then we just need to understand, and we can make our decision if that's
Correct.
obtainable or not. So,
I think you could probably, access points, south side could be, and, build your accesses.
well, they're gonna be where the other roads are. There might be one in the middle between, but that can be figured out when that pod gets figured out in the future.
Okay,
That's how I envision it on a street like this.
yeah, and it's, again, it's a long time coming, so I think we'd like to do that right. For sure. Good question.
I'm kind of intrigued by the next gen homes. I like the name a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting, so this whole, again, there's a lot here, and we appreciate you, kind of taking some time and looking at this as a whole. There's some products here that we have been kind of borrowing from other states. Next Gen has been pretty popular in Nevada. The BTRs have been pretty popular in Arizona. And there's reasons for that. The BTRs has kind of been our attempt to do something different on multifamily. Instead of the second, third, 2, 3-story buildings, we kind of want to do something different that gives it more of a community feel, more of a safer feel. This is kind of a community that you can get into, as a young family, maybe as an older couple, and kind of grow. Our idea is to grow within the project, so you go from the BTR to maybe the next gen, and then you find yourself into the single-family products.
I like it. It does have, the renderings have a nice community feel, and I'm excited to see those next gen homes, because I think we're gonna have I think we're gonna see more of that style of
Building.
smaller subdivision, more of that style of building.
Yeah, and I
And
think
so
that's.
this is kind of on the cutting edge probably from what we've seen, at least here in Washington.
It's a little bit different, but I think that's kind of what we're going after,
Yeah.
because we've got plans, and Councilman Bellison brought up a good point, what's the other 70 acres look like? We hope that within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we could actually come in with a conceptual master plan of the entire project so that you can feel a little more comfortable, looking at, what we're proposing. That document has been developed and has been submitted to staff. So staff has been looking through it right now. But we didn't want, again, just phase 1 by itself is a lot. We didn't want to bring that as well as the entire conceptual plan all at one night. for review. But that is something that we will do here shortly, I'd say shortly, within the next 4 to 6 weeks, to present the entire master plan of the entire project, so you can kind of see what that is going to look like and what it's going to feel, and hopefully it'll make sense at the end of the day. Now, addressing the question on the amenities, according to the PUD, and Commissioner
Anderson?
Anderson, he brought it up and he did a really good job, trying to break down the math on it. Currently, the business structure of Phase 1 is with the Turner family and another group. That other group does not have the, how do I say, exclusive to the rest of the project. Obviously, Turner's own the property, so, they'll be there with the land. So what the suggestion was in Planning Commission, if we can look at Phase 1 as its own pod, and whatever the PUD requirements is of a PUD development can be just looked and addressed and met in Phase 1, which includes amenities.
You're calling Phase 1 both Pod 1 and 2?
1 and 2, correct.
Okay, so then, as I understand it, because it is a PUD, Pod 2 doesn't have, where it's supposed to have something, some park space, right? And I know the spring, it's an active spring, I don't know that really qualifies.
Correct. So there is some conversations, on some flexibility, some options that we talked about last week, Wednesday, in Planning Commission. There's some, an amenity that's part of the BTR that could be utilized. And then there's another section of property that's on the, I'm calling it the north, at the top, right next to the next gen, that would fit the 7,000 something square foot requirements on the amenity that's required for that area. So we're looking at keeping all the amenities that meets PUD code within Phase 1 to handle both Pod 2 and Pod 1.
Is Pod 2 going to have the ability to access the amenity? Because they kind of seem like different. I know it's the same PUD, but it feels, usually these townhomes are like owned. They don't have access to it. Like there's a townhome next to me that I can't use their pool just because I live next to them, and I'm not paying any fees for it, so I shouldn't be able to. But in this type, are they going to have, is all the development going to have access to that?
So right now, the way it's being proposed, the BTR has its own amenities with its own access. We would have to figure out another way, whether it's the section on the the south side, towards Bullock Drive, to carve that out, as well as a section on the north side, just coming in from 1100 to the next gen to meet that.
You're talking those two triangular pieces?
Yeah, the two triangular pieces.
And you would incorporate
So
those
there'd
as
be-
amenity for Pod 2?
Yeah, that's what I was.
Go, Councilwoman Casper.
Councilman Kiss, go ahead.
He basically, you're gonna put amenities for Pod 2. We're no longer doing it down below area, so you're gonna have their own amenities in Pod 2. Pod 1 will have their own amenities.
Correct. So again, it's a little interesting, but part of it too, it could be that a section of that spring area could be used as amenities to offset the requirement. But the question that was brought up, and I'm not sure how council feels about this, and this is again, some direction from you, is there amenities there currently that we may have proposed a lot that we can use as a temporary amenity to suffice and not build a house or build 2 houses on these lots to meet the criteria for just Phase 1. And then as we expand and do the other pods and then build a bigger amenity for the entire development, can that again change to residential, and then the pod or the amenity that we build to take care of the rest of the development cover that requirement?
Which 2 lots are you just said not building a house on these 2 lots? Which 2 lots are you not building a
The spring, where the spring is.
Right next to the spring
The 2
there.
big ones, the 2. So that whole area will probably not be built for several years.
You're talking 127.
126, 127, there's probably, I'd say probably 17 of those units. I think you can see there's like a 2A, 2B, and a 2C. So 2C is probably not going to be touched for several years.
Yeah, I'd rather see the amenities in that section, corner and on the two ends.
Yeah, and again, some of that is timing as well. Again, the matriarch, this is her sanctuary, her spring, and that's something that she's protecting and making sure that she can enjoy for her entire life. So that's gonna be tricky to do that, but that is an option in the future.
Square feet do you need for an amenity?
7,600 or something that, what's that?
How many lots are in the single family?
Single family, you've got
60.
42.
Oh, that's not counting the next gen, right?
Yeah.
Not
So,
counting
so
the
next gen is
okay.
17, single family lots is 42. 8,400 square feet for pod 2.
Just for all the single family guys, if there's 42 single family, sorry, Tara, I know you're,
That would be
if
one.
there's 42 homes, you would only need to have one of those and put some amenity on it.
Just take one of those lots and make it a little amenity, and then when you build the rest of the development, you turn that into a house, right?
Yeah, that was kind of the discussion that was
thinking.
made during plan commission as
Yeah,
well,
I
as
like
as an alternative.
If you're doing that, why don't you just take lot 100 that's kind of over there in the of the single family lots? Because you said phase 2 may not come on for a period of time. I mean, because I think the requirement says you got to have the amenity
Yeah,
50% or something,
yeah.
so.
And I think that's kind of where we are definitely all on the same page. Whatever requirements that we need to do, and at the given time, it will be done.
So we've been,
We just got to figure out where.
But we've got to, I mean, we've either got to include it in this motion or table it and to figure that out so that it can get included in the approval.
so on the amenities, we've historically done 33% of building permit.
Okay.
So that's what we've done. I'd like to stay consistent, just because that's what we've done on a lot of
I think that's
amenities.
fine, Councilman.
So that's kind of where I'm landing is I just want to be, I'm trying to be consistent across all these development and not say, well, you gave these guys this and these guys this, just be consistent. Now, how we deal with that amenity, I don't think any of us are, I mean, I'm not hearing anything on is it pod 1, the new wave, whatever,
BTR.
Next gen,
and whatever you want to call it.
they're kind of on their own, but I was just going to point that out. I think we did the math last time, and if the applicant wants to allow them, tell others, they could actually have the next gen homes because the number of them could be included in the rent, the townhome rentals to meet the amenity for the number of units.
Having a partner and how it works, I just think it gets messy, and then you have fights between HOAs of, oh, you're not supposed to be here.
So are they separate, the next gen and the
Correct.
rent? Or
BTR.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll
No,
have to tie them with the other then.
So I'm saying that the amenity, just 33% to be consistent, but on the other amenity, if we're talking about a PUD, I don't mind pushing it somewhere else, like they said, but I want a bond saying they're gonna do it. Kind of a deal is, okay, what kind of bond do we put up? And it's any kind of bond that the city allows. Say, okay, we're gonna put a 7 acre, whatever that cost is, the staff, that's just an idea to, that way it's delayed, but it's more of a delay to their residents that, hey, it's coming, but it's not there yet. You don't always put the amenity first on the whole PUD.
Timeframe on that section down there, right? So if you're building,
I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm throwing out an option to think about.
I get it. Me personally, I would prefer to see something in pod 2.
Pod 2.
I prefer to see something go in pod 2, and then if you want to tear it out and move it somewhere else at a later date, whenever that stuff down south comes on, and turn that into a building lot at that point in time.
I think it's important that I didn't want to get too far away from the water because ultimately what the Turners want to do with their water, that's the most important thing. If they want that to be part of an amenity, we'd like to leave it on the table or something at some time when they're willing to do that, because that'd be really nice. If they sell part of it or they want to create some kind of an amenity there on site, I think that that's something that is obviously going to come into play in the future, not right away, but I think that that's a good conversation to have.
So would you be open to language that may go something like, that the amenity for pod 2 is built built as part of pod 2, or can be bond for a future. I don't know how to tie both of those in if there is a.
I think you got to decide one way or another.
Okay.
You're selling homes to families that are gonna be moving in now.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a requirement for a PUD that they're buying into a PUD that we have an amenity on the front 33 or whatever, and I think it ought to be part of at least
Agree.
the front 33 of pod 2, right?
Agree. So let's do
I
that.
mean, I don't care if it moves at a later date. I don't
Yeah.
care if you do one lot over here and then move it over with the spring water, or and at that point in time, move it all the way down south. I mean, but I think the amenity needs to be provided to the people
With
that are
pod
buying
2
into it.
as its own standalone. Okay.
At least that's.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm going to be the devil's advocate for you. So they're going to build this amenity, and then everyone's going to be mad when they tear out the amenity to build a lot. I'm just saying.
We'll put it in the closing. Like
I know, I'm just saying, I mean, or where all of a sudden you're tearing out my family park, they're gonna get in there, even though the plan's been to put a lot there all the time. I can just hear
just like tearing out somebody's field and.
I know, I'm just,
And there's some, I think with this
first time.
property, because of some easement, there's some interesting opportunities on the west side, because there's at least a 20-foot easement utility there on the west side that is a power easement that could be built as a trail that could tie in some future design to some really cool amenities that can tie or give access to the entire project to use that trail to get to an amenity, again, at a future time. But I do like the idea of having pod 2 meet PUD requirements, which includes having the proper amount of amenity square footage.
To see and not necessarily identify a lot tonight, but just say,
And work with staff.
yeah, and then you work with staff
Or
and come up
parks.
with whatever
Planning.
works. Yeah, I mean,
would have to be identified within pod 2.
that's what I would say, yeah. And then down the road, when you develop the south end, you turn that into a building lot and all is good. So at least that gives you some flexibility. So that way, if they want to farm it for another 20 years, then those guys have a place to play
Yeah.
in the meantime.
Yep.
So,
Appreciate that. Any other questions?
So maybe just a comment, and I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this, but when I was reviewing this before the meeting tonight, I looked at, there's some rental in there that we need. There's single family, there's some multifamily, but it's not overcooked. I don't know a better word for it. We get that a lot, that there's just every inch is impacted. And I like the fact, and what I'm seeing is that you're really taking kind of a community approach to this development, from what I can tell of the numbers so far. And, I appreciate that, because it makes it a little easier as a city councilman to realize that you're trying to build something there that has the legacy like the Turner Farm has had. That they're actually wanting to give back something for the quality of life that probably they've had there that they want to give into the next generation. So I appreciate that. I think the numbers are realistic for the size, and I like the idea of I love the idea of the commercial on the south along Telegraph. I think that's a great opportunity to not only provide some much needed commercial infrastructure along Telegraph, but also that on development and development across the street there on Telegraph. That there's really not a lot on that corner to be able to walk across the street and have some shops and stores and things to visit in that part of the city, because there's really not a lot there.
No, I appreciate the comment. And again, when you think about it as well, I mean, they're not going to move. They live right there. So if you're building a project with the owners that are right there as part of the project, it's important for them to do something well, and do something that is accepted by those that are living there and enjoy it. Again, because if not, they will just walk across the street and pull in someone's ear there. So I think, there's some thought that's gone into it, obviously, but there's also some thought in, okay, how do we replace the revenue that the sod farm has generated for generations and spread it out through 9 different siblings? So yeah, so there's a bunch of fun things going on with this project. So I appreciate the advice, appreciate the council, and look forward to any other questions you have.
I'll jump in again here. So on the from the renderings. Pod 3, I guess there was a 4, 5, 6, 7, those other residential areas
Right there, yeah.
where you've got the acreage and then the number of units. Is it your understanding that if this is approved, that you're vested for that number of units per acre? Because that's what's, to me, that's still, back to Councilman Bell's point, to me, that still looks like that's part of this approval request.
I
we
would
can
take this
handle it in the
exhibit out
motion.
of the equation, this specific exhibit, just because of what it has on it. I would take that exhibit completely out of the equation and just look at phase 1 and pod 1 and 2 as the.
I understand that we could or can. I think it's a lot cleaner to have an exhibit that doesn't show those for future staff that looks at this and doesn't maybe look at conditions. And then I think at some point, and maybe we're to that point now, and look, we can't require water. That is the owner's asset. But I think we have to realize that when you have property that has provided a livelihood with water, that livelihood is transitioning from farming to development. I think the right thing to do is to come to an agreement with the city on a clear, not just not, we'll have that conversation. There needs to be a clear understanding of how those transition and when. And it's not that the city is a fair market purchaser if there's a willing seller, but that we have such a challenge to provide water to the homes. And here we're talking about a development that's sitting on property that has the water, but yet we're holding on to the water, but asking for basically max density in every one of these. And so to me, I get it. I understand why they're doing it and they should be doing it. But I think simultaneously, we can't kick the can down the road about having a serious conversation of what do we do? It's the reality situation that we're struggling to provide water. If you're changing your business model to where you're no longer going to need it for farming, then we ought to sell it at fair market value to the city, because we're now being asked to provide it, but we don't have it.
And we also have to think about the infrastructure that potentially needs to go into these roadways, that if there's a spring there, a larger pipeline may be required to handle it. So there's those things that we need to start planning in these type of developments.
Yeah, we've had initial conversations with the Assistant Director, Public Works Assistant Director, Lester Dalton, and he's brought up some really interesting, I'll call it opportunities, with several springs along I-15 and on exit 10 on the opposite side of the road, and how those may cause some challenges. So as far as the spring is concerned this evening, we obviously don't have all the answers on how to mitigate that or how to use that or how to move that one way or the other. That's why we're going to work with the hydrologist. But I think as far as the conversation, Mayor, I think that's something that we can welcome, whether it's something that is, the city attorney, the city manager, with the property owners that we can visit with and schedule time to start talking.
And obviously we can't go back in time, because really those conversations should have been had along the vesting process, because every additional entitlement without that happening puts the pressure on the city to provide an asset that you have, but we have limited. So it's just, and again, we're not exacting this, but we're just saying it makes sense that when you're transitioning from farming that uses water to housing that uses water, that you have a city that's duty is to provide that those be sold at fair market value. Do you mind if we just invite Lester to come up and speak to some of those things real quick?
Sure.
Lester?
Mayor Willig's coming up. What you're saying is act in good faith.
Well, and I know Matt and I know the applicant, but I just think that I just worry that we shouldn't be kicking the waddle down the road any longer. So Matt's saying that they're willing to have the conversation. We're willing to have let's have it before we get too far down the road and then something changes. Drew, or Lester.
And from
And
the
speak
water
right into that,
perspective-
Mike. Take the middle
Yeah,
there, buddy.
from the water perspective, this is a little bit of an interesting situation because the rights that they hold are a surface water right. They're not a groundwater right. So,
Okay.
yes, they can move, but they're still a surface water right. So there's a lot of moving components and a lot of moving pieces to this. We have other springs that potentially, depending upon what happens with the spring that's here, I mean, potentially our springs produce more water than what we've got papered rights for, which would bode well for us to be able to get our hands on these water rights. You know, and from my perspective, I don't know that I have any of the answers right now as to what, you know, potentially could happen with this. But at the same time, I'm with you, Mayor. I feel like we ought to come to some kind of
I
terms.
mean, is it a right of first refusal? I don't know
Potentially,
what that
something
looks
that.
like,
Maybe-
but
maybe
something
some
that just kind
terms of that form
cements
that-
a good faith.
Exactly, cements something in a good faith effort that, you know, these rights don't end up going to the.
Let's go Councilman
highest
Ellison and
bidder
then
as
Thad,
things
and then
go
we'll
down the road.
let you keep talking.
Yeah, so I guess, I heard right, that they're going to continue farming on the south parcel, at least for the foreseeable future. And the water that comes out of there is used for that, or is just
Yes,
not?
yes,
It
that's-
is.
they use that water for the sod farm currently.
So then the discussion of the water rights and whatnot, I mean, while it ought to start now, really comes into play when development for those south parcels come up, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But, you know, I tend to agree. I think it's a good idea to start down that road and have that conversation begin now, and lay out the groundwork. You know, who knows what happens when they go to try and make use of this. For all we know, the spring's gonna go away. But the right's still there. The right's still a paper right that we can still make use of. If we've got a situation of a first right of refusal on that paper right, we have a potential to be able to use it from a different location and transfer that surface water right.
And the great thing that Washington City has is a expert in water rights.
Thad, he's talking about you. Also he's also an expert in the abatement of dangerous buildings.
He is.
Thad, your input on this.
Thankfully, I'm just a rookie on the dangerous buildings issue, but I'm learning a lot as a rookie. So we've said some things, and one of the common refrains is the city cannot take that. Now, if the city had passed a code that authorized the exaction of water rights in exchange for development rights, the city could. And in that scenario, the city would impose that code against an applicant, and there would not be a consistent or a coinciding payment of value for that. And so it is true that the city can't just say, give those to us because we have an application process you have to follow. I would assert that it is not true that the city council could say, look, in exchange for an approval on some of these things associated with your what's the word, your blanket approval for PUD, we require that you enter a contract that set the dates and times and details under which that water right would be sold to the city. And so I do think you could require an agreement in conjunction with an approval that establishes the terms and details, one of which would be the price, for example. Another would be, the strike date when this would transfer. I have a few good ideas. One is you sell it, coinciding with the vesting, with an agreement that they get to use it until they're done using it, right? Until they've received approvals for all the zones that they're going to do in the future. Or you draw some other date, and I'm sure that the family would have their own viewpoints on some of those things, but I do think that you could say, look, we require, in conjunction with approvals, an agreement that gets signed and sets forth the definitions that we think we need. And because the city has groundwater rights and surface water rights within the same region here, because the city is a utility water provider, because surface water rights are difficult to transfer to other lands, and because the city's not aware of other lands that would even want to have surface water rights, there's a lot of public reasons why we could make a good faith argument that it's in the best interest of the citizens in the city of Washington that we have such an agreement.
Can I ask a clarification? Now, for everyone in the room, we all know that they're entitled to this project without the water even coming into play. That's their right. They have that right to do that, but it would be advantage to the city. But my point is that I don't want anyone that might be listening at home think that we are making it subject that we're going to get the water or we're not going to approve this. That could be part of the negotiation and part of the ongoing process of working in good faith, considering what the family wants and what is best for the city. Would you just clarify that just so that we make sure that we understand that?
So to date, I would not agree that they're entitled to anything yet. They've got a very undetailed sketch of a future detail that would come before you. Tonight, you're seeing a portion of that detail.
Ultimately.
And so I'm stating that I believe there's sufficient public concern and interest in water supplies, as well as they're submitting an application asking for some promises on vestings, that I think you could connect the decision on vestings with an agreement.
By condition.
Correct. Now, again, the agreement has to have terms that they agree to. I don't think you get to cram anything down their throat. But yeah, I think you could say we require, in conjunction with this vesting, an agreement that defines the when and how much for this transfer to happen.
Could you just say, going to what the mayor's comment was, first right of refusal? And the city would have first right of refusal to this rights in the event, once we get down the road, because that seems like a lot of commitments to kind of, spring on everyone tonight. But again, on the same breath, what we're looking at is just phase one. The spring discussion could be a discussion that we can have at a near future time, but I'm not sure about tonight how that can.
So a right of first refusal is only the right to buy it if it is for sale by the seller. So if you're wanting to talk about just some future option, I think you're really talking about an option that the city council could exercise when they're ready and give it an option period. A right of first refusal only is exercisable when it goes on the market by the seller anyway. And so in theory, if they never sell it, you don't never exercise that right. So I really think it's up to the council on what they are comfortable with as to a commitment as it relates to, the sale and acquisition of that water right someday.
And would this decision be consistent with everybody else within the city that has surface water rights moving forward or past?
I'd say it's consistent with the PUD and PUC developments where they're helping solve the problem. So these type of developments, some people give up land, some people help stuff, put in upsized water lines, that kind of irrigation lines. I'm just saying with these type of developments that are larger scale, they do a lot of those things to help the city at a cost that's to them. Now I'm agreeing that there's value to the springs. I don't think I'm trying to say there's value to the water. There's value to it. It's just when you have a large development and you want all this density, you want this stuff, you got to be partners. And so where is the partnership on this aspect to us? So that's when you say, are you doing it to everyone else? If it's a 10-acre parcel with 10 lots, they probably don't have water rights. It's different, right? But when we talk about these bigger developments, they're partners with the city because they're bigger. Hills did stuff. Solente's doing stuff. There's lots of different things that these bigger developments are doing to help solve the problem. Coral Canyon did it with their irrigation ponds that they have that feed the golf course and stuff like that. So I think we have to look at it differently than just a small subdivision.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that.
You're doing a small part.
I appreciate that clarity. Again, in my mind, I'm just trying to figure out, as contributions are made with other developments, there's also incentives or increased densities or other considerations that's outside of a PUD application.
Can I make a comment, Mayor?
Councilman, yes.
I think what I would feel most comfortable with is voting on this, these two pods. And then maybe we make a commitment tonight to start having a discussion on water. And then when you come in to talk about the south end of the properties, then water could be part of that discussion. Because, that's just kind of what I'm thinking. I know that water's a part of this, and it'd be great for us to, be able to buy some of those water rights. But I think at this point, in the interest of having you guys, be able to progress with your project, I'd like to maybe just look at what we're doing here. Is my mic not working? And then have the water discussion be more of a part of the rest of it.
I appreciate that.
But
And again, going to Councilman Coates, we are definitely full on board for being a partner with the city. And whatever that looks like, whatever that detail is, obviously it's a 95-acre project, which is a good size, big project. I understand that it's different than a 10-acre project or a 10-lot subdivision. We are more than happy to, do what we need to do to make sure that there's a collaboration and partnership with Washington City. That's not even a question.
So and I appreciate and understand what Councilman Henderson's saying. The concern that I have, though, is we're going from kind of a blanket conceptual zoning to now further entitlement of platting lots. So we come further down the entitlement process without having had the conversation about how do we best, to use Councilman Coates's, without having the conversation about how do we best partner. So is the next conversation, well, we already were entitled for these 190 lots without the partnership. I mean, at what point do we have to have a partnership about a conversation about partnership? Because, I mean, on both of these, the applicant is basically maximizing the allowable density, and also on the future pods, asking for maximum density. So there's got to be a fair give and take here. I would feel most comfortable as some sort of a condition that conversation happens, or some sort of an understanding that future development of the south side don't happen without not just a first right of refusal, but that contract that states the time, the terms, the details, et cetera, so that it's not a surprise when we come up here. And it's not, again, it's not trying to be, it's just not trying to be confrontational, it's trying to the reality of where we are and the resources that we have. How do we use those together? Developer wants lots. We have a duty to provide water to the lots. Councilman.
Can I make I think I have a way in a motion, right? So I'd like to make a motion.
You've been doing this a
when I'm
long
ready.
time.
I'm not ready for motion yet. If you're Councilman,
Then make your comment.
I have comment I'd like to make. So for what Councilman Henderson said, I was thinking, and I actually quite like what he said. I think that maybe we ought to just hit the pause button for a moment and just say, what if this is a 95-acre development that doesn't have water? Then how are we approaching this then? I mean, that obviously should be something that they can use for their negotiation. And I'm sorry, that's just the way things are done. You know that. We just had one of these happen a couple of weeks ago. But if they didn't have any water, how would we be approaching this? Are their rights being observed? I know we need water. I know as well as, and I appreciate everyone's advocacy for that. This is an individual that's asking for an application land use, and we're trying to bring in water to that conversation that kind of, in my opinion, it binds some of the rights of the owners. And I don't mean to overstate that, but that's why I like what Councilman Henderson said, because we allow them to move forward with the idea that that conversation can be had when the owner has a better idea of what he wants, and the city will have a better idea of what that looks like. I don't see how allowing them to move forward with pod 1 and 2 affects that. I just don't feel comfortable in wanting to bind their hands because they have water. Just one sec, Councilman, I'll finish. We have this same situation in our family. We have property where there's water that has always been out there in another city that neighbors us. And, that's always been in that, every time we've tried to bring that water forward as working in our family with that, it's always like that is the biggest bargaining chip, but yet it should be, I don't want to overstate it, because I do know that we need the water, but I don't want this to be viewed that if they don't play ball and give up the water, that it's going to affect their land application process and their right to develop the property, regardless of the water. That's my concern.
But, okay.
Councilman Ivy, I agree with you, especially in light of the fact that they're continuing farming down south, right? So I mean, I don't want to bind up phase one or pod 1 or 2 on the water argument. Like I said, I'm ready to make a motion. I think we'll hopefully address that, moving forward, later on, right? So whenever you're ready.
Council, further discussion and or motion?
I'm sitting here going, I don't think any of us are trying to stop the development, but I'm a big advocate of on these bigger parcels, we're partners and we got to work together. And that is something that we need to look at. I mean, I wish it would have been brought up before, tonight, before it get in our hands. But that's all I'm saying is that some people have water to bring to the table. Some people have land to bring to the table. Some people have, they're going to build a bigger amenity. I don't know. There's just things that people bring in these PCDs and PUDs that benefit all parties. And yeah, usually it comes with a little more density, and this has plenty of density already. So that's all I'm saying is that in this application, we should look at
It's
it,
maxed the density, essentially.
So, I mean, we allowed the PUD C and R come in with no plan to get the zoning. I think we're in good faith going that forward. Now this is the first phase of the plan. One of the things that I just thought of is you look at, and I think it's phase 2C, everything on the spring side, lot 125 to 140. I mean, why are we bringing that forward if we don't even know what we're doing with the spring yet? So that was a question to you, Matt. Is that something that we just take off the table tonight and only work on pod phases 2B and 2A for right now? I don't know. It's just trying to figure out 2A is the townhomes, but I don't know.
I think that's definitely an option as
Just
far as your motion is
Yeah,
concerned.
There's no
2A
plan
is
to
the
develop.
next gen homes, and
Yeah.
then 2B
Yeah,
is
so
the
the
street.
It's
2C is the current location where the spring
The
is at.
spring is, it's like, why are we even talking about that if we don't plan on developing it and we don't know what we're doing with it and there's all
Yeah,
these
I
issues?
think part of it is just showing a design of what it could look like.
But
with
if
the
we approve it
roadways and-
tonight, you have vested right to build those lots the way they are. So that's why I'm saying, that's what you're asking for. And so I'm saying, well, if we're unsure how we're dealing with the spring and the water, maybe we just don't even talk about that tonight. We take that off the table. It's just a question to you as the applicant's rep. Is that something you're open to?
Yes. So we could look at 2A and 2B and not include 2C.
Then maybe it helps your concern, Mayor, of then we have to, when we go to look at that, we evaluate that and the future stuff to the south. 'Cause I'm
That
looking
would
for a
give me more
pathway
assurances, certainly.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Councilman
so
Salzman.
Mayor, can I make a motion?
Yes.
I'm gonna butcher this
But
thing probably pretty bad.
You're being so
but-
polite tonight, Councilman.
All right.
I appreciate your restraint. Go ahead.
I'm gonna cut and dice this just a little bit. Can I make a motion? I'd like to make a motion that we approve an ordinance for zone change Z-25-16 to update the existing PUDC and PUDR located 1075 East Telegraph Street, but we only approve portions. We're only approving Pod 1, Pod 2A, and Pod 2B. We're approving the setbacks as was outlined in the staff notes. We're approving amenity plan that's consistent with our other PUDs at 33% must be in prior to the 34th percent permit being pulled.
Pod 1 and Pod 2?
Of
A and B?
all of tonight's approval, which is Pod 1, Pod 2A, and Pod 2B. That we are approving Bullock Street in full build width,
Curb gutter sidewalk?
current sidewalk, with the exception of any requirement for landscaping south of Bullock. I don't think
Yeah, I agree.
that per this approval, any future submittals on the properties, whether it be 2C or anything south of Bullock, come with a plan for the distribution, but the
Transfer?
transfer or a plan of the water rights that are on the property that is consistent or that is agreeable to all parties, including.
Can I ask a question? Drew, can you point out 2A and 2B? I'm confused.
Show you right here.
The next gen homes,
2A is next gen, 2B is that street.
B is off each side of the street right there. It goes north-south.
And
Can I-
Now
just
clarify
2C?
2C. Clarify where 2C is for everyone.
2C is this area to the west of,
The hashed line.
yeah, the hash line right here. That's,
It's lot 125 to 140.
yeah, so 140, 125, 128, and 129, and everything west. Those lots included in west are part, or 2C.
Which would not be part of my motion to approve.
Right, now, can I just, because we talked about, and I think, and Matt was okay, you just tag and let's eliminate this exhibit?
Fine by me.
With the
I think
units.
they ought to sub- I think they ought to submit a new exhibit that omits anything else on here. Pod 1, Pod 8, 2A, and 2B.
So we're not, can you maybe clarify that we're not approving the units on future phases?
I absolutely would want to clarify that we're not approving any density or density allocations or location or additional approvals.
Would you want to, I apologize. Do you want to go?
Can you, I don't want to do this to you. Can you clarify the condition with the water, or, I know you were kind of thinking it as you went, but can you just maybe restate that of how you see that with the water conversation?
Trying to think of the right word. It's not dissolution of water, but there needs to be a transfer or
Thad said, enter a contract that sets date, time, terms, and details of water rights transfer.
that was perfect wording.
And let me ask a question. Why are we not approving Pod 2C? Just
Because there's the spring
Tied to it.
and there's our,
Make some changes. They said they don't, they said earlier they didn't have a plan on how that's gonna look because they haven't done the testing.
I second the motion, Mayor.
I just had a question I started with Councilman Bellis, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And this is just clarification.
Okay.
I like your motion, Mayor. Am I good?
Go ahead, yes.
So, Councilman, I was just going to ask, you want, where we're going to follow the diagram of setbacks, do you want that to be a condition or just in your motion?
Well, it's part of the staff notes, right? And it was part of our submittal. I would say that's approved and included into their PUD plan.
It's on the map, so.
So my job is to make sure that the motion is clearly understood. And I will note that there is a motion and a second, so we will vote on it. Does anyone have any additional questions on the conditions that the councilman put onto the motion?
can we just review it one more time, the motion?
Oh, gosh.
I wrote them down.
I want to hear the whole thing, clearly spoken.
Maybe Steve can replay it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We will go roll call vote on the motion as stated and clarified by Councilman Bellison, and the second by Councilman Coates. We'll go roll call vote beginning with Councilmember Casperson. Belliston.
Aye.
Henderson.
Nay, because I need to hear it again.
Really? I thought you were kidding.
No, I wasn't kidding.
Okay. Coates.
Aye.
Can I
And
retract my vote
Ivy.
if he wants to hear it again?
I'm going to say nay. I think Councilman Henderson needs to be able to hear it.
Okay. So that motion,
It passed.
wait. Councilman Casperson, are you an aye?
I'll be a nay, so he can,
That's not how it works.
Should do a motion to reconsider right here if you want, if you really,
The motion fails.
That's what I'm hearing. I just needed to clarify. You were serious about restating the motion. So
I can restate the
the motion fails.
No,
And-
hold on, it didn't fail because we had 3 ayes, so we have to do a motion to reconsider, right?
Okay, so following process,
Depends on whether or not the mayor allows Councilwoman Henderson to
Did you say councilwoman?
Councilwoman Casperson
yeah,
to change her vote, because she was the yes vote, and then she asked to change it.
yeah.
So that's up to the mayor.
Yes, and this council moves along together. I misunderstood Councilman Henderson, so I'll ask Councilman Henderson just to restate your motion. I have notes if you need it.
I could use them.
Do you need my glasses?
Did we change the motion? I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm just trying to make sure we follow
I don't
procedure.
think we changed the motion.
Let me restate, let me just restate
Councilman
it, because I
Henderson-
think it kind of encompassed everything that we were trying to get at. That I'm making a motion to approve an ordinance for zone change Z-25-16 to update the existing PUDC and PUDR located at 1075 East Telegraph Street. However, in the motion to approve only includes Pod 1, Pod 2A, and Pod B.
2B.
2B, that's what I said, right? It includes the setbacks as proposed in the diagram in our staff notes that will be included in the PUD. That the amenity plan shall be 33% before the 34th percent permit is allowed to be pulled.
For both pods.
Both pods,
There's
correct.
2 separate amenities.
Pods. Be fully built out with the exception of landscaping on the south side of the street,
Which includes curb, gutter, and sidewalk.
which includes curb, gutter, and sidewalk, not including landscaping. That future submittals for 2C or anything south of Bullock will include
It's on the back.
a contract that sets date and time, terms, and details of the water rights. That we are not approving any density allocations or layouts south of Bullock Street with this approval,
Or 2C.
or on 2C.
Thank you, Councilman. I feel it's clear. Is there any further clarification needed on the motion? Okay. I have a motion on the table by Councilman Belliston.
Second.
I have a second by Councilman Coates. We will start with roll call vote, beginning with Councilwoman Casperson.
While they're figuring that out, I was less confused that now that we did it the second time, so. Thank you. All right.
I thought we sometimes have a little bit of fun up here, which doesn't mean we don't take it very serious.
Everybody wants to see the project moving forward, but we also understand it's a huge project and what was presented has some overlapping stuff that we weren't comfortable with approving, but we didn't want to hold the rest of the project up in that meantime, so.
I think you got it right with the motion.
Aye.
Belliston? Henderson?
Aye.
Coates?
Aye.
Ivy?
Aye.
That is approved as stated unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It was like old times, Drew. That was a good one. It might be your last. It was like old times.
Can I ask a question? Not to
Councilman.
keep it going, but I'm confused. Did Casperson change her vote?
Yes.
You had to allow her to change her vote.
Yes.
You know, we could do that. Look at all these cool things I'm learning.
We're all kind of learning on the job here. Volunteer
Well, I really
service.
thought you were joking too, because you laughed, and so.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's an easy request to, I mean, it wasn't maybe,
I just didn't fully understand the motion, so thank you for allowing that.
It's a reminder that we all have different views, but we don't leave another council member behind even if we don't fully agree, we tell you understand. So just really appreciate each of you, and I know that was a tough one. The best thing I think we can do now is move to the next item. Actually, we have 7 items under resolutions. So we are on item 9A. This is consideration to approve a resolution setting the property tax levy for Washington City calendar year 2025. City Manager Jeremy Redd.
Let's move from something complicated to something wildly easy and talk about property tax and how we figure property tax. A lot of this will be a review for most of you, but we're talking about the certified tax rate, which means the rate that provides the same amount of revenue as we collected the previous year. What happens is the county assessor goes in and assesses all the properties in our city, and they determine what the rate should be for us to collect the exact same amount of property tax dollars that we collected the previous year. So that changes every year depending on if the values increase, the rate goes down. If the values decrease, the rate goes up. I think everyone understands that. So this is kind of an interesting slide. Same thing, you take your budgeted revenue divided by your current year taxable property values to get your tax rate. This year, our certified tax rate is 0.000747. And then down there in the bottom, it's a little smaller, but you can see that it's down from 0.000762, which means the value of our properties in Washington City have gone up slightly, so our rate goes down slightly. So we take that and we get that that revenue that's the same as last year, and then we also add any new growth that we've had in the city. I think it's always interesting to note this year they have calculated our new growth, so the amount of new businesses, homes, just all of the growth in Washington City at almost $475 million in 1 year. So you take that and you add that new tax rate, that certified tax rate to it, and that gives us a new growth revenue of almost $355,000. So we will collect more property tax than we collected last year, but it's because we have more properties now to help take care of. Any questions so far? So our total property tax revenue for 2025 will be just short of $5 million, 4.943. Choose the certified rate. So I updated this. We hadn't done this for a couple of years, but I think it's always instructive, and I think it's something that is misunderstood by a lot of property tax payers. I just picked $550,000 as an average home value. That's somewhere in the average for Washington City. If it's your first home, you pay 55% of that value. You pay property tax on that. If it's a second home or commercial, you pay 100%. So this is as if we had a first home that was valued at $550,000. You can see your total taxes would be just over $2,000. And of that, $159 goes to Washington County. The bulk of it, 3/4, $1,500 goes to the school district, help educate children. The Water Conservancy gets $125. Washington City gets $230. And the mosquito abatement gets $6.66. So for a total of $2,050.35. Now, again, if it's your second home, you're going to add 45% to that, to every one of those values. And then I think everybody up here understands we're getting to the end of our Coral Canyon SID assessment, but if you're in Coral Canyon, you'll add another $346.36 onto that for that assessment. Any questions on how we get to that and what property tax funds? So this is a new slide that I wanted to add this year, and I think it's worth discussing. The state will allow us to raise our property taxes. We don't have to remain property tax neutral. We don't have to keep the certified tax rate. We can pick any number we want. It does have a maximum, but we're nowhere near that maximum. We're probably 10% of what that maximum is. We're way off of that. So if we were to have chosen as a city, and it's a little too late for this year because the state makes you declare this by June 1st. We don't even have these numbers by June 1st. So I think there's a problem in the way that the state law works. We don't have this until just after that, the first couple of weeks of June. But if we would have kept that rate the same, 0.000762, and we had not lowered it to the certified tax rate, then we would have collected an additional $106,000 worth of property tax, which means that on that same $550,000 home, it would have been $8.25 for the year or 69 cents per month that would have changed. So it's, a lot of cities now are moving to this concept where they stay rate neutral instead of revenue neutral. And the reason why is, if you think about it, the reason why your house is going up in value is because of inflation. And inflation puts pressure on all the services that we have to provide to the residents as well. And so if you kept the rate the same, then as inflation goes up, you would also have sort of an inflationary component on your property taxes. So that's a concept that some cities have looked at, and I think we should consider it more carefully next year and try to get those numbers earlier from the county if we possibly can, and look at that.
What did you, people on fixed incomes?
Same thing, it'd be $8.25 for the year would be the change. I don't know, you know, that is what it is, if they have a $550,000 valued home. The interesting part about that is if we would have kept the rate the same from 2021 until now, we would have an additional $2.1 million each year in revenue in our property tax funds. So it's a little bit every year, but as you let that continue to stay rate neutral instead of revenue neutral, it really does make a difference in the services you can provide. So just something to think about. Like I said, we do not have this option this year, but I think it's something that we should at least consider, have larger discussions on next year. I just wanted you to have that in the back of your mind. Any questions on that difference between rate neutral and revenue neutral as far as choices? And then, of course, I did have a question from one of the council members. You could also choose to pick a number or pick an amount that is higher in a year. Anytime you choose that rate neutral or you choose to pick an amount that's higher, you have to go through a process called truth in taxation, where you send every resident a letter letting them know that you're raising the property tax rate above the certified rate, and then you have a public hearing. And some cities go through that occasionally, and they do larger increases. Some do it every year because the rate stays the same. And then some, like us, haven't done anything but the certified tax rate for decades. So,
Jeremy, you were telling me before, what was the last time we did truth in taxation?
I'm not aware that Washington City has ever done truth in taxation, but it's sort of a new process, probably in the last 12 years. But it's been at least 20 years since Washington City has raised above the certified tax rate here.
Truth in taxation is essentially a special type of public hearing required by state law if you're going to touch your tax laws. And so it's really just a unique and special and really kind of detailed requirement if a municipality is wanting to change their tax rate. And the public policy behind that is to require the city to go to kind of extra lengths to make sure that folks have the chance to hear a proposal, give a public comment, and be aware of changes that get proposed.
There are two examples I can think of. Hurricane Valley Fire District went through this last year. They raised their property tax rate, I want to say almost 50%. So it was a huge increase. Is that right, Drew? 54%, he said. They went through the truth taxation. They enacted that. You saw 4 or 5 years ago, St. George went through truth and taxation, had the public hearing, and then chose not to raise the property tax rate. So those are kind of the two most recent.
Can you go
in
back
our
to your
area.
prior slide?
Sure.
So in Hurricane, they would have another separate line item for the Hurricane Valley Fire District that
Correct.
was similar to the city tax, but that's the one that they did truth and taxation that now it's about 1.5 times.
Correct. So now they have an additional line that we don't have. We fund our fire
Out of our general fund.
out of this $230 that comes to the city. Hurricane City does not have any expenses for fire, so they collect a little, the same amount that we collect or something similar, but they don't have any fire expenses. And then there's an additional
One and a
line
half
item.
times, just roughly.
1.5 times that funds the Hurricane Valley Fire District, yes. So there's a lot of different ways that this can be funded.
interesting.
And I think that that's really the conversation that we need to be having, or at least the thought that we need to start having right now is, how do we want to fund these services that we know we are potentially a little bit behind on, or make sure we stay current with, so. But my recommendation this year and what I've put into the resolution is that we stay, and we really, our only option at this point, because we can't do truth and taxation, would be to keep that rate or lower it. And so I would recommend that we keep the rate of 0.000747 for our 2025 property tax year.
Thank you, Jeremy. Go ahead, Councilwoman.
I was just gonna say, I've liked how we've done this traditionally, and I appreciate the information on this. And I like that we've prioritized, businesses coming into Washington City. Do you see that, those sales tax, make a difference in where we're lagging behind?
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Because we're not keeping up with inflation in property taxes, it puts a lot of pressure on sales tax to make up those differences. And when we're in a growing city, growing area, we've been able to do that for the last 20 years, take the additional sales tax and honestly be really careful, keep our belt tight, be careful with our expenses, and we've been able to do that. We see sales tax continuing to come in. We've seen increases in sales tax every year. It's hard to have a crystal ball and predict when those will come in, but yes, we expect that sales tax will continue to increase. That's the projection.
Jeremy, didn't we just have our highest sales tax month just recently?
Yes, 2 months ago.
Well, the thing that's interesting about when you talk about, we've always been very proactive in Washington City trying to generate, as Rusty sits down, I love this, to generate commercial development. Because ultimately, that pays 65% to our budget, where property tax is 35%. And so it's always been in our best interest to advocate, retain, ask people to come here and open their businesses and support them because of that. Because I know this council, I'll speak for myself, but we're very concerned that we don't want to raise taxes. We don't want to have to. So tightening our belt, asking for commercial development to come in, all helps extend that time to where at a later date, that we might have to make changes to this at some point. But it's also a testimony to the city that we do very well with what money we have. And I feel very strongly about that. But one little matter of clarification, Jeremy, if you don't mind. One of my first years on the council, somebody, after this conversation, reached out and thought, you have to clarify tax levy and property tax levy. So a tax levy is when you sell someone's property for not paying their taxes. That is not what's happening here. This is property tax levy, where refers to the total amount of money local government intends to collect through property tax for a fiscal year.
That's correct. Yeah. Yep, this is your property tax bill. A lot of your residents will see that if they own their home, they pay this bill once a year. If they have an escrow account, which I would say the majority of your residents do, it's just included in their monthly payment to their escrow account.
If there's no further discussion on this item, I'll call for a motion to approve a resolution setting the property tax levy for Washington City calendar year 2025 at 0.000747.
So made.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilwoman Casperson, second by Councilman Henderson. We'll go Bellison. We'll go roll call vote, starting with Councilmember Casperson. Ivy.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Bellison.
Aye.
That is approved unanimously. Item 9B, this is consideration to approve a resolution setting the property tax levy for Washington City Special Service District in Coral Canyon, calendar year 2025. City Manager Jeremy Redd.
Mayor, quite similar. This is the property tax levy for the Coral Canyon Special Service District. This is a little bit different because it's based on the amount of money that we need to pay the bond each year. And so this is a different way that it's assessed, but essentially, we take the amount necessary for the bond every year and we set a rate. So if you added, 10 or 15 new homes in Coral Canyon, or, they're adding homes all the time, then that rate changes because there's more people to help pay for it, but the bond remains the same. So this year, the rate that has been calculated is 0.001021, and that would be the recommendation.
How many years left on that bond? We're getting pretty dang close.
2027 is when it ends.
Okay, so 2 more years.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. I'll call for motion to approve a resolution setting the property tax levy for Washington City Special Service District in Coral Canyon, year 2025 at 0.001021.
Mayor, I can make that motion. Do you want me to restate it?
Up to you, Councilman.
Motion to approve a resolution setting the property tax levy for the Washington City Special Service District in Coral Canyon for the calendar year of 2025 at 0.001021.
I have a motion by Councilman Ivy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Coates. We'll go roll call. Councilmember Ivy.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Belliston. Casperson.
Aye.
Is approved unanimously. Item 9C, consideration to approve a resolution accepting the fiscal year 2024-2025 fraud risk assessment. We finally hit the point we've all been waiting for. Brian, we know this routine. What's our score?
This is one of the last items we have to do for this year. And this was established in.
We're like horses going back to the stable sometimes,
Yeah, this was established in 2020 by the state, and so our score is the same as last year. And the higher the number, the better. Our score, as you can see up here, it breaks it out by each item that the state has our score, and it's 355 out of 395, which is very low on the scale.
This is like golf, very low.
Thank you, Brian.
So here you can see the summary on the screen of the fraud risk assessment. Do you have any questions about the fraud risk?
The math seems weird. It doesn't add up in my mind. But we only missed 20 points, but
We missed
40 points.
There's 40 up there. There's item 3 and item 4.
We need a designation, and what was the other one?
I missed it.
Elected officials required to bid by the ethical behavior standards, where we have everyone sign.
Okay. All right.
Mayor, I'll make a motion.
So that requirement requires everyone in the city to sign an ethics statement.
Great. Councilman Coates.
Motion, we approve the resolution adopting the fiscal year 2024-25 fraud risk assessment.
Have a motion by Councilman Coates.
Second.
Second by Councilman Ivy. Roll call because it's a resolution. Councilmember Coates.
Aye.
Henderson.
Aye.
Belliston.
Aye.
Casperson. Ivy.
Aye.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you.
9D, consideration to approve a resolution amending the Washington City culinary and raw water rates. Rockstar Lester Dalton, back at the mic.
Thank you, Mayor,
You've got
Council.
2 minutes of stage time, brother.
Well, I hope it doesn't take that long. I won't go through the entire staff report that I did for you guys, unless you've got specific questions on it, just kind of hit on a few of the highlights. This isn't per se an increase to the culinary water rates. That was approved back in February of 24, I believe it was. And what we've done is, in the ordinance, it is that rate with the 5.5% increase. We had that in July of 24, and now again in July of 25. The previous approval, we would continue at 3% thereafter. So the ordinance has been adjusted to just reflect the 3% ongoing. Probably the biggest highlight with this would be the inclusion of the single customer that we have that uses raw water that we pump out of Quail Creek Reservoir, bring up the hill, drop it into Razor Ridge Pond to provide water to the golf course. That rate was last adjusted in 2019, I believe it was. The golf course received the rate study. They were actually pleasantly surprised that it was as low as it was. They were more than happy, didn't have any real concerns. They understood the study, and we're very appreciative of the level of detail that we went into with it. The other component that kind of caught us off guard a little bit, the Conservancy District back in 2016 had approved a resolution that we were going to have a 10-cent per 1,000-gallon increase for 10 years. So that was supposed to carry through to 26. Last year in 25, they exerted a 13-cent per 1,000 increase. And then this year, it's gone to 15 cents. So in our rate study, we had accommodated the 10-cent increase, but not the additional. So if we prorate that out for this year, that equates to, just because of our consumption versus our consumption from the district versus consumption of our own water, we receive about, last year was 62% of our water is coming from the district, either via raw water for our treatment plant or finished grade water that we're receiving from the district. So it's close to a 60-40 split. So there's an additional 3 cents that's included on the culinary rate.
Councilman Belliston.
So that 15-cent increase,
Yes.
is it only on culinary or raw or both?
It's on both. So the proposal in the resolution of the way that it's written is we will calculate that prorated based upon the previous year's consumption of district water for the culinary use. The raw water use of the golf course will be a direct pass-through because there's no prorating done with that. All of that water is coming from the district.
Makes sense to me that it would be the same price for both, where one's gone through a refining process and the other one's raw.
Yeah, and that's how it's been since we first signed the regional water supply agreement. They've just done it. The increases have been across the board.
Lester, do they plan on increasing 15 cents here forward? Like, what's the new plan for the next 10 years?
They don't have really a long-term perpetual plan. The initial intent was that they would do it on 10-year increments, and they realized that they probably shouldn't have done that. It didn't keep up with inflation. That was the reason for the 13 cents last year and the 15 cents this year. They go through and do a rate study every year. The 13-cent one last year kind of caught us off guard because we didn't even hear about it until, our budgets were approved. We were done, basically. Everything had been finalized, and I might have even been adopted. The cost to produce it.
But they're still charging us the same price on the raw that we then refine.
Yeah, there's no fluoride in
I
it.
think they're throwing the raw in there.
Dennis for that.
Agreeing with you. I'm just saying, I think they throw that raw in there.
So I don't know if everybody had the opportunity to read the way that it's written in the resolution. So there's 2 different calculations, one for the potable water and one for the raw water. The potable water will be a prorated just based on how much of the water we're providing from our wells versus getting from the district, whether it be raw water or potable.
So Lester, your recommendation is to approve the resolution as presented in the packet, correct?
It is.
Thank you. I'll look to you, council, for further discussion and/or a motion on item 9E, item 9D.
Mayor, I can make a motion on that. To make a motion that we approve a resolution. We approve a resolution amending the Washington City culinary and raw water rates as presented.
For the motion by Councilman Henderson, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Coates. We'll go roll call, beginning with Councilmember Henderson, Belliston,
Aye.
Casperson, Ivy, Coates.
Aye.
Thanks, Lester. We approved that unanimously, but don't go far. You're back on stage. It's called an encore. When you do so good, you get an encore. Item 9E is consideration to approve a resolution for a reimbursement agreement for Merrill Road Sewer Line Improvement Project with City of St. George. Go ahead and give the staff report on that item, please.
Yes, Mayor, the report on this has been an ongoing project we've been working with the City of St. George on for the last couple of years, kind of coordinating our sewer outfall line that we're trying to get installed on Merrill Road. That we've done a segment in the middle, basically. This actually completes the outfall component, and there's still one more segment in the middle to get done. We've been working with City of St. George kind of cooperatively with their piping of what's referred to as the Y drain there on Merrill Road. They've finally come to terms. The City of St. George has come to agreement with PRI, which is the development arm of the church, and they've come to terms to get that ditch finally piped and carry that all the way through, get Merrill Road widened. As part of that process, we want to get our sewer line in there under a single large project that everybody's cooperating on. And we ended up getting some pretty good bids with St. George and PRI. This project would be the construction of our outfall line through that segment of roadway, which is would be our Sandia Road, St. George's 3000 South, through to Harvest Lane. They'll be collecting our stormwater there, carrying it all the way down Merrill Road to ultimately to the discharge of the Virgin. So we would be getting our sewer line installed, as well as full reconstruction on our northerly half of the road. So that segment of road would be brand new, shiny black with all of the utilities in.
We drove there with our work session meeting, and it desperately needs repaving.
Yes.
Pretty beat up.
Yes,
So-
it is in horrible condition. The future phase of the sewer project, we would plan on doing reconstruction on the remainder of Merrill up through to 20 East. Both Streets Department as well as Sewer Department, we've got these in the 26 budget. They're budgeted for items. The overall reimbursement agreement is in the not to exceed amount of $772,209.68. And that includes both the sewer line construction as well as the roadway construction. The reason for the not to exceed is we're hoping to get a little bit of deduction from the contractor if everything works out right and the groundwater's not as bad as they think it's going to be.
You've heard the staff report from Lester Dalton.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve the reimbursement agreement for Merrill Road Sewer Line Improvement Project with St. George City in the amount of $772,209.68.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed amount.
Motion by Councilman Coates, second by Councilman Belliston. We'll go roll call, beginning with Councilmember Belliston.
Aye.
Casperson.
Aye.
Ivy.
Aye.
Coates. Henderson. That's approved unanimously. Thank you, Lester. Item 9F, consideration to approve a resolution for an easement and facilities liability agreement between Washington City and the St. George of Washington Canal Company. City Attorney Thad Segmiller.
Okay, Mayor, give me a minute while I pull documents back up on my machine here. This is an agreement that is not going to surprise anyone. We have worked on it and variations of it for a really long time, a couple years. And a lot has changed as those years have come and gone. So to have some of the concepts. Just, Steve, if I can airplay to the monitors, please. There we go. So I'm showing you here on the screen something that looks a lot like what's before you today. This one, you'll notice, is between the St. George and Washington Canal Company and the City of St. George. The Canal Company did seek to get one of these signed from both the city of St. George and the city of Washington. The document before you tonight started with this document and then made a few changes for Washington City purposes. And then I'm not going to read the whole St. George City draft for the council. Once signed, it'll include 2 exhibits. An exhibit like this one, which is a conveyance easements. So the agreement will show the conveyance routes of the canal company's system through Washington City. And then it'll include legal descriptions of that. So they'll go get them surveyed so that there's a proper measurement and legal description. The legal descriptions get really long on canals. And then it'll also include an exhibit that shows the drainage easements. Again, this is the exhibit of drainage easements through the St. George City portion of the canal's service area. And then this area's got a lot of legal descriptions because there's a lot of little tiny sections that needed a legal description. The document before you tonight won't have these in it yet, but the concept, if approved, is we would get all these put together and they would be added as exhibits to the Washington City version. So I bring you to the Washington City version. The one thing we did was add some cleaned up just text and word processing so it's a little more clear. The recitals are essentially just the reasons that bring us together here. Recital A, the canal company provides water to its stockholders. Recital B, in that process, the canal company has conveyance easements, collection and drainage easements, and then it mentions the locations to which those discharge, essentially the rivers and washes. It then mentions that, over time, the city has annexed properties that have included the easements and drainages of the canal company. That the city's approval of some of those have changed things, and the city has also utilized to some degree the drainage and stormwater areas of the canal company. But the canal company has some concern that the city's usage of that can create some problems for them. And essentially we go into terms of agreement. The first thing we do is we define conveyance easements, drainage easements, and stormwater. Those definitions are the same between the cities. The second thing we do is we acknowledge that the canal company has its systems and easements within our city. These paragraphs are the same between the 2 cities. Third thing then is called the assignment of drainage easements. The language here is the same between the 2 cities. But the actual easements will be different. In Washington City, let's go to the city map. We have what we call the Y drain, which is a drain along Merrill Road and a drain along the other part of the Y. It's just a backyard area. Both of those comprise the primary drainage easements of the canal company in Washington City. And so that is largely the map that you will eventually have someday attached to this exhibit. There is some language in here in condition to the assignment. The canal company wants the city to agree to preserve their capacity to drain and sluice their lines if need be. So these drainage easements have had 3 purposes. The first one is to take the runoff waters from a flood irrigation system and run them to the river. The second one is to allow them to push water through their pipe and clean it out, which is called sluicing. And then those waters need to drain somewhere. And the third purpose of these drainage easements is actually to drain the lands. The lands out in this area have shallow groundwater, and to make them arable for agriculture, there's a history of digging trenches that then drain the surface water away so that the soil can be fertile. And so the city, if we accepted this, would agree to preserve the capacity that the canal company has historically had to discharge through here. We would also agree to give them a right of notice and approval if the city were to sell, convey, or give these away to anybody else. And that seems to be something that we're willing to do. I don't believe the city has any plan to do that, but if we were to assign these canal company drainage easements to somebody else, we would have an obligation to give them notice of that. Number 4 is talking about how these are going to be operated and maintained. And so they're asking the city to agree to operate it in ways that, again, preserve their historic rights. If the city adds additional capacity of stormwater or wastewater, that the city would take all actions necessary to comply with state, local, and federal law. In consult with the water department and public works, that's something that the Public Works Department is taking care to do on all their divisions, and so it's something that they're comfortable agreeing to as it relates to these drainage areas. Number 5 is a little unique now. They're asking that the city protect their conveyance easements. Conveyance easements, remember, are not where the water drains, it's the piped line where the water becomes served to the land. And by protect, they're giving it some definition, which is to take all actions to prevent damage to their conveyance system that's foreseeable from construction and development activity. So to give an analogy, it's essentially to do a blue stakes for the canal line, right? Essentially, if the city has any of its own contractors or any developers who are permitted or licensed by the city is agreeing to make sure that those actions protect the canal line. And then they would kind of detail some of this. Require that construction activity meet or exceed accepted standards, right? Cooperate and assist in investigating the removal and remediation of anything that is unauthorized. And so let's say somebody goes and builds it without authorization. This is asking us to agree to get after them and have them remove it or fix it. Periodic inspections, maintenance, and repair of what was completed to make sure that it's not damaging or threatening the pipelines. Repair or replace at city's expense, and this is a big one, so I'm going to go through it word for word. At city's expense, damage by development activity or infrastructure installation that is approved or authorized in writing by the city, and where such development activity or infrastructure installation has or will become incorporated into city's public utility infrastructure. So I've added about 2 lines into each of these in addition to what the St. George Agreement had. St. George is nearly a majority shareholder of the canal company, and so they were willing to make some guarantees to the canal company that's really just guarantees to themselves. In this case, I strengthen these sections to make it clear that the city's obligation only attaches where the city has very clearly authorized the action that created the problem. And it's saying that if the situation exists where the problem was created by something the city knowingly did, then the city would come in and repair or replace it.
It essentially passes costs on to the developer who maybe caused the damage.
Correct. Let's say it was a developer, we would pursue them and say, look, we've become aware, we have a duty to fix and repair this, so we're pursuing our duty by telling you need to fix and repair this.
What is that pipe made out of, Thad? Is it concrete or 20?
Not concrete anymore. What is it? It's in the concrete bed of the old canal, but it's a HDPE. It's probably how thick, Lester? It's a big pipe. The risk with it is it's not buried very deep. It was essentially laid within the canal way, which was mostly a concrete way. And so if you were to go dig through it, you would encounter concrete in most.
They just lay it down in the old concrete bed or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it 4-foot pipe or 3? 3 inches, okay.
Get from the confluence, it gets smaller in some areas.
And so essentially, you may be thinking, so what is the facility that may need to be repaired or replaced? And the primary one is the pipeline itself, the pipe and its location. The canal company does have certain facilities along and around that, but currently it's not a pressurized line, so there's not really pump houses or anything of that nature. They've got some facilities in line of, valve boxes, access points, things like that could in theory be damaged as well. Anything else that I'm missing on that point, Lester? Anything else that they've got along there that could in theory be damaged? And so really what we're agreeing to do here is if somebody or the city comes in and damages the canal or the pipe that's sitting in the canal, we're agreeing to fix it. It's something that we authorized. Paragraph B, city shall protect companies' irrigation, conveyance, distribution facilities for any lands that the city may annex in the future. They really were adamant that we have one of these, even though there's no lands in the city that we may annex that has the canal on it. And so I would call it a paragraph that's not getting them much farther. But essentially what they're saying is if the city approves any repair, damage, whatever, the city shall respect their right to occupy the easements. And so this is really a legal question of making sure that they have in contract that the city isn't disputing their right to be there. And I don't know that the city's ever had any disagreement with that. And so we're okay with that. And to also protect from other, again, damages, things that happen to it as it comes along the way. This one here is one you should just be aware of. City agrees to bear all costs of protection and repair of all damaged company facilities and the conveyance easements resulting from all construction or other activity occurring within city's conveyance easements, and where such construction, repair, maintenance, replacement, or activity is a facility that has been or will become dedicated in the city's public utility infrastructure. So similar language, I added similar language here as to those other sections. Just trying to at least give a qualification as to what it is we're making promises about. The original language is much broader, just basically said the city will protect them from anything and everything. And it makes sense that St. George was willing to do that because they were the majority shareholder. For us, we just tried to narrow it down to anything that we've authorized that harms them. We're still willing to, uphold our end of a problem. Then some subsections to that regarding lands that will be annexed or that are currently annexed. They ask that the city indemnify them. It's a similar concept as to protecting for any damages or liability that comes from public roads or public utilities or other public uses, infrastructure that gets put in the area. So in theory, let's say that, the city has, let's say there was a high pressure water line that burst and failed, which then caused the canal to also fail, which caused property damage. This is saying that we agree to indemnify and pay any damages they end up being held responsible for that occurred because of something we did next to their canal. It's not a concept. The city agrees to take care of problems we cause in the same sense on a daily basis anyway. So it's not an unknown concept to us. We don't usually do this with private water companies, though, and so it would be a new agreement for this type of a scenario. This is an interesting one, which basically says when the water company decides to maintain, repair, replace, expand, damages that they cause to city stuff will be responsible to be the city's duty unless they did it essentially negligently or without observing an industry standard for the work they did. And so, again, let's say that the city puts a exercise trail on top of their pipeline. They come in, dig it up to fix their pipeline. The city is saying that we would then repair and restore the trail at our costs. And so that's what this is saying. I've put an exception in there. Let's say that there's it's not an exception, it's just a qualification that is not within the conveyance easement. So let's say they came in within their easement and dug up their pipeline, but in the process they caused a leak that destroyed a road. This is not saying that the city's responsible of outside of the easement that they damage. So they're still anything outside of the canal that were to get damaged.
I'm concerned with that area because if they decide to come in and do a different type of pressurized system and just tear it up, they should have to fix the trail. So I'm concerned that just because they don't want to, but they might come in and put in that's a flood irrigated system. If they put in a pressurized irrigation system within their easement and then we have to fix the trail, I don't think that's right.
Yeah, that's how it currently reads. This is what they're expecting because of what their shareholder, St. George, signed. And I do think you're reasonable expecting that
who has
I believe that with the Warner Valley Reservoir, the intent is for that to become a pressurized water.
And that's my concern is that, and I'm not opposed to it, but we're putting a lot of our money to improving that by buying our own easements and buying our own things so that we can put a walking path on some of these areas. And then they're gonna come in with a pressurized system and say, oh, sorry, that's your problem to repave it. And they're doing that right now. I just think if that's the Conservancy District, now we own 0 shares in the canal company. We own 0. I just don't know why it's our responsibility to fix all their stuff if they decide, just because which we have a right to, because we've purchased the easements to be on those. So that's my biggest concern about this.
I'm not stating that it is currently our responsibility. This provision, if approved, would make it our responsibility. I think you've pinpointed an important point. Part of why this document has some of the priority language is they want to be able to say, look, our easement was there first, you guys came and built stuff knowing that we were there first. So again, you're responsible for the stuff you put on top of us after we were already there. And so I know that's a concern of the board. I don't believe that legally the city has any obligation to agree to this today, but that's what they're asking us to do, and that's what they think is fair.
That if it became pressurized at some point, would that require new pipe, or just, it would require a new pipe? Then
Yeah.
this is a major concern.
The current pipe is big and thick, but it's not necessarily built or installed to be rated to carry pressure. And so they would, and it's starting to become antiquated. It's not the youngest pipe around either, and so.
Become a natural, an upgrade that would need to be made as part of the new reservoir coming online and all those.
And the reservoir in Warner Valley would hold the canal water. And part of that is it's siltifying it and removing all the silt and sands that are naturally in those waters. It also is creating a pool of water that's like a water tank, create a pressure into a pipe system. And pressurized water lines for irrigation are much, much more usable. They're because you've had it sit in the reservoir and clarify and siltify, it's just an easier to maintain water system. There's less silt collecting in the pipeline, but you're also able to pressurize that and push it into places that right now it only flows per gravity, but per slopes and gravities, right? And so
Do you think it'd be advisable to put some kind of a condition in that if it became pressurized, then we wouldn't be responsible to repair?
I think we could add whatever language the council wants there. And I think that the concern is probably bigger than just pressurized. Let's just say they wanted to come in and upsize their entire line. That would dig up miles and miles of the city's trail, right? And so they're gonna say, well, look, for 15 years, we could have dug up and upsized by just moving dirt and then burying it in dirt, and now we have to move a trail. And so they're gonna have an argument that the city chose to put our trail on top of them, and part of that was acknowledging that if they needed to repair it, they shouldn't have any more costs of repair just because the city chose to put a trail on top of them. And so their point is not poorly placed. I mean, there's no question, the city putting a trail there, the cost of them repairing their original facility is going up if they have to pay for it.
We have roads, we have sidewalk, we have all kinds of things currently on top of the canal. Would this, if we approve it this way, would they essentially be able to come in, tear up all of our roads, all of our sidewalk, everything, and then if it was within the canal easement, place their pipe and then walk away from it?
Correct, that's how this reads.
I think that's a bigger concern than I was even thinking. Because now there's crossings every 1,000 feet, there's a road crossing, and now that they're not responsible to fix that if they decide to upgrade it. It just seems, it's not.
I don't know that that's their plan. I mean, I think we need to be clear. But legally, based on this agreement, they could try to exercise that right?
So this one says if they're negligent or they don't use a reasonable care standard, then they aren't excused from it. But if they came in and hired the best developer service and dug up the sidewalks and roads where it's within their easement, this is saying that Washington City would pay to repair and replace those.
It would be reasonable if the pipe that's in the ground now had met the extent of its life.
So they're gonna
replace it.
Counterpoint is gonna say, before the city built their roads and sidewalks there, we could come in and replace our line at an expense of 5. And because the city chose to put all of it there, it's now gonna cost us 105. And so we, the canal company, didn't do anything. The city chose to, therefore the city should. I'm not their attorney. I'm not saying that's a winning argument, but that they've communicated to me as I've worked on this agreement. And so
Your position presently, like, if something were to happen, if they were to do that now?
when something happens, some of you remember a couple years ago, we needed to cross the canal for the Dam Road rebuilding project. So we went to them with an agreement in hand that says, we want to cross your canal. We gave them a document that says, we'll pay you for any and all, pay and repair anything that we do that damages your system anywhere, anyhow. They declined it unanimously, which included my father's vote, because they wanted an agreement like this that obligated the city at all locations of interference, not just that one. And so they've wanted this for years. They've held their gun for years. They would like Washington City to give them a similar type of they gave them, which is they don't have to have any added expense to repair a irrigation feature, an irrigation system, especially where annexation and development has caused surface uses to be added that makes it a lot more today than for annexation and development.
Then it sounds like we need to work out an agreement with them. I'm just concerned that we're putting ourselves in a hole when we don't have to. We're not a shareholder. They want to provide us with some shares to help us with our irrigation problem. Maybe we are fine with replacing and managing more of that stuff. But as of right now, I'm struggling with it because they hold their gun on, no, it's only our way or no way. But, oh, will you sign this to take care of all our problems? That's how I'm looking at it. That's what concerns me.
Due to, it's been taking years because I've held my guns and I've now got family members and friends that all are blaming this on me. So I see the same thing you're seeing.
But I do appreciate where we're at. I think it's better than agreement than we had. I just don't know if I'm ready to move. I mean, me personally, move forward with something like this where it's all on us. There's no like, give and take. It's just you get to take it all, Washington.
One contingency that's kind of been held over, I don't want to say over our heads. The city has received grant money, and Lester could describe it in greater detail, for the concrete, essentially really large concrete piping so that this could be buried. And they're not willing to give the city that easement so that we can access that. Well, it's the plans, but it's the canal company's right of way.
In that office complex that we were at today.
So you'll see here how the property lines kind of lie, but really the right of drainage through there is held by the canal company, and they're not willing to convey that to the city. And at some point we're going to lose, the grant will expire and we'll lose that funding source. And so that's really the only strong incentive other than just wanting to try and be cooperative with another utility that runs through.
So Judge, let me ask you kind of a pull back and a big question. So we're obviously trying to put a running trail on top of their easement, right? Do we have to have this agreement signed to do that?
No, the running trail is a property right interest, and 2 easements, 6 easements, 10 easements can exist over the same piece of surface. Where it becomes a problem is when one impedes the other from making their use, and because their use is actually a buried pipeline and ours is a surface trail, neither one of us are in conflict. The other reason why we're allowed to do that is the city paid and invested money and really professionals to help us. We went and acquired from the underlying landowners the right to be there. And so the city is invested in having the legal right to be there just as much as the canal does. And so essentially we're both having rightful property interest to be there. We have to not harm each other as we use our easement rights. We also have to not harm the underlying landowner, which in most cases is homeowners that have land that's been developed along the canal path.
A follow-up question then, if we can do it and keep ourselves out of this kind of an obligation that could happen at some point. Why would we go through with, why would we do this?
To try and be good neighbors to it.
So there's also a little more to it. In some areas, the canal runs through BLM property, and the president of the canal company wrote a letter of support for the canal in those areas, with the understanding that we would work on this contract in good faith, which we're doing now. So that's part of that working relationship with the canal. So there's large sections of trail where they've already written letters of support with the understanding that we would negotiate in good faith on this particular contract. And so, but there are some tension points. I'm not gonna say there aren't. Who is your point of contact with the Conservancy District, I assume? Is it Jody or Zach or?
Zach Renstrom.
Working directly with Zach.
Zach and I work directly on this. Jody hasn't had involvement on this with me.
I mean, if the council doesn't have an appetite to approve as written, is there some feedback that you can give to continue to negotiate in good faith? I want to.
What I would like is to take council feedback, bring you back another draft that reads like you want it, and then bring it back to another meeting for consideration. If then approved, I would take it to Zach and say, here's what the council approved after, a couple.
I mean, it sounds like this is the biggest issue, right?
I think this is, we've done a good job of kind of focusing and narrowing some of the areas. We're still making them promises, but they're at least tied to things we've authorized to happen.
Have the exhibits to go with it too.
Those exist. I couldn't find them in my inbox.
We have them.
They're out
I
there.
thought I saw them, but that's why I want to confirm the areas we're talking about.
Yeah.
Judge, my biggest concern is the law. In this, we definitely want to be good partners. We want to work really well with everyone and understand that we kind of got a joint responsibility here. But this could really be a lot of money for our city if it's not detailed properly, in my opinion. And I think limiting liability is kind of where I'm at.
All the other promises are tied or connected to things the city has authorized to be added to the city's infrastructure system. So the trigger on all of those that I added was things that we decide to allow. This one has no such trigger. Anything they believe, repair, maintenance, replacement, or expansion of what currently exists, saying that Washington City has, or they're done.
So with that, the biggest thing in my mind that concerns me is the district's gonna bring a pressurized line through portions of these areas, and they're gonna tear through streets, trails, whatever, and that's a total change from what was there existing. If it was just, hey, we have a break in our line here, let's fix that, that's not a big deal to me. It's, hey, we're gonna run 2 miles up this section and replace all this line, upsize the line, all that. Oh, by the way, here's your bill. I don't think that's right. That's my concern, I guess. So if we can weed that down to say minor repairs or something, that's when I will feel more comfortable. But if they're gonna put in this new pressurized line and we just spent a couple $1 million paving a bunch of this, that should be on them because they're changing the use, in my opinion, from farm field things to pressurized reuse.
What if we just worked with the language and said, we get rid of expand, right? So any expansion of use needs to be done at their expense, right? So now we're just looking at the 3 other words, repair, maintain, or replace. Are we okay with the idea that if they need to come and repair what existed when we put the sidewalk on it, we're willing to cover that expense because we knowingly put it on, a large, pipe?
More comfortable with it, yes, because that in my mind, that makes sense. Hey, we had to come in and fix this section of pipe, not I'm replacing this entire pipe all the way along here.
And that limits our liability.
We just deleted the words replace or expand, and we just said, if they ever determine to come in and repair or maintain what exists, again, what was there when the city authorized what's now on top of it, the city would assume that responsibility. But if they're gonna upsize or expand, they're gonna come talk with us before we're gonna give any promises to carry all of that expense.
You can beefing up that language and get it.
I would just delete those. So you got 4 operative words. When company determines to repair, it's the first line of paragraph C. Repair, maintain, replace or expand. I'm just suggesting we delete replace or expand. Repair and maintain, Because then that just refers to the existing irrigation system. And again, that's what was there when we built our infrastructure on it.
Seems reasonable, doesn't it?
Still saying city shall, but city shall only relate to repair, their decision to repair or maintain what's already there.
I mean, if your legal opinion says that works and it doesn't get us, I mean,
That works for the concern of them bringing a new pressurized system. They could still say, look, we need to repair or maintain every last inch of pipeline by, digging it up and putting new in. Leave us with the same situation of a pressurized, right? But yeah, the way it reads today, them bringing pressurized irrigation.
But let's talk a
It's
little
right
bit
there.
about how that might look going forward, right? I mean, you said that the city of St. George is the second largest shareholder. The largest is the Washington County Water Conservancy District. And the reality is at some point, it will be the Washington County Water Conservancy District who will do those improvements. So I think the conversation, understanding needs to happen with them in terms of, look, if we've got to replace and expand this, then certainly the infrastructure that you tear up, trails, roads, sidewalks, et cetera, that needs to be at your expense as part of that larger project.
Yeah, and I like that.
That's where we're going with it. It's not gonna be,
So that's
it's
a
not gonna
separate
be
agreement.
the guys that your dad and my cousin that are on the
Yeah.
canal board, that, they just, the farming is going away and the uses, and really the control of that board is changing.
Yeah, and really it's the control of boards in two entities. One entity will likely influence the other. Yeah, St. George City driven policy decision, right?
And yes, because of the shares, but also we have gained a lot of ground and influence in water policy at the district too. So we're in a lot stronger position than we have historically been, I think.
I would like some more language in here that basically, I like your idea of cutting that, but just some more language very specifically saying improving new lines, installing, not just saying repair does not mean replace the entire line. It means small segments. I don't know. I'm just.
To limit their liability.
Yeah, it's all about limiting what we have to fix. And I'm not discrediting the fact that, yeah, we added an improvement on top, but those shareholders also gain benefit from the development that's gone around them as well. So it goes a little bit, and I'm not trying to, I don't
Exactly
think,
right. In most cases, the roads and sidewalks were built by shareholders who sold their land and kept their water shares. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. In most cases, what's on top of the line was put there by shareholders as they developed their farms.
Okay, council, to move this along a little bit, Thad, are there any other major points you want to point out to
Nope.
the council, or do you feel like you've got the feedback that you need? I'm hearing that we want to likely table this for continued negotiations.
that's where I'm at.
So again, I'm not negotiating directly with Zach. I told him I would meet with the council and get him a draft that they could approve, and then I'd give it to him, and he, out of his folks will approve it. And so what I
So what
would
are you
do,
thinking?
I would go back and make changes to this paragraph and bring it back to another meeting. See if that meets the council's.
Would you like that in 2 weeks, or do you need a month? What does that need to update?
2 weeks is fine, yeah.
So basically, we just need protection in case they come in and wipe out the whole line and expect us to repave it.
True. The water leak scenario, I think we're looking like, yeah, we can absorb that. But yeah, you plan to just come in and tear everything up and do some large type of a project. We don't have the budget to just absorb that, and we don't feel like we should be obligated for their proactive planning to tear stuff up, right?
Right.
And so if there's any other interest, I'm gonna delete 2 words and add it. Just bring it back to you is what my plan is.
Maybe just, Judge, maybe just give it a proofread. What we're looking for is fair. I mean, I don't think what we've adjusted today was fair.
The reason this has taken 3 years is a lot of beatings on that standpoint.
We're not gonna beat you. Beat you
At the
just.
point, father's not in my favor, nor my cousins or town. It's like I'm the look enemy number one on this one.
But Thad, we're in your
So
favor.
I'm not drafting it.
I know who my clients are.
The Thanksgiving at my house.
Thank you.
What kind of emotion are you looking for, Thad?
I think you just probably table this and instruct me to bring it back to the next regular meeting.
All right, who wants to make that motion?
Do you want to just?
I've got a motion to table for 2 weeks by Councilman Belliston till our next meeting, a second by Councilman Coates
July 9th.
to July 9th for clarification. A resolution against, we're going to go roll call. Councilmember Belliston.
Aye.
Henderson. Coates. Ivy.
Aye.
Casperson. That's the table for, until July 9th is approved unanimously. Moving along to item 9G. Thank you, Thad, by the way. Thank you for your work. Item 9G is
All 3 years.
consideration to approve a resolution approving amendments to the transmission service agreement for the Central St. George Transmission Project to authorize certain upgrades to the project, the issuance of bonds by UAMPS to finance such upgrades and related amendments and related matters. Thanks for hanging with us tonight, Power Director Rick Hansen.
We're going to go through this word by word.
No, I'm not.
One of these days, Rick, you're going to get something really on the agenda. Seems like you're always at the
I
tail
won't
end.
comment. I won't comment.
You know,
I won't tell you how long ago this was put on. But that could give you an inclination.
Approving amendments to.
Steve, it was shared a second ago, and then it looks like you took it away. Or we can just do it without. This one's actually pretty straightforward. Washington is part of the Central St. George project with UAMPS, which consists of Washington, Hurricane, St. George, and Santa Clara. Mainly consists of the transmission facilities from Central, St. George Sub, River Sub, and the lines that feed our city, Santa Clara, and the other Hurricane and St. George. The project was formed back in 1989, and over the years, obviously, we've grown. The last major improvements to the project were done at least 15 years ago, probably more like 20. And as you can imagine, the loads has grown. The loads of all the cities have grown. And so we did a study that basically shows that we need primarily more transformation or transformer capacity at the River, Skyline, and Green Valley substations. So basically, this resolution authorizes Washington's portion of the bonds in order to facilitate those improvements. It's a 5-year project. For the transformer portion, roughly in the $25 to $30 million range over that 5 years. Washington is roughly 15% of that. And all these documents were in the packet. And basically, we're going to move the 2 existing transformers in the River Sub up to Skyline and buy 3 new ones. And that should get us hopefully in another 15 to 20 year type period before those improvements are done. See if I can find the right ones. And the wording in there kind of looks ominous because it says 100 million, but that's a cumulative amount over since the life of the project. And so this changes it from like the 65 up to the 100 million total authorization. And they will structure the bonds. Got a little graph here. So right now, the current bonds will pay off in 2028. We've elected or recommend that we pay interest for those first 3 years, and then the debt service will actually drop. There'll be a second issue. The first issue will be about 15 million for the first 2 to 3 years. The second one will be the remainder. And so in reality, the bond payment will end up somewhere in here, but it will be less than what we're currently paying. And so that's the,
So
Go ahead.
what entity's paying that bond back? Is it all the cities
correct,
through the rates
yes.
or?
We get billed, it'll be billed on our UAMPS bill. We have a central St. George bill. And it's on that, and that gets incorporated to what we pay.
And
to
we're just paying our pro rata share of
Correct.
what the overall repayment is?
Okay, that actually works out good here. So Washington right now is 15%, St. George 64, Hurricane 14, Santa Clara 6.
So if we approve this, do we then have to turn right around and adjust power rates within the city to cover it?
No, because we've done this to try to levelize our debt service, so it's not gonna.
So it's already built within the current power rates that we have on the books?
Correct. Yeah, so we'll see a slight increase here in the next couple years, but this isn't a large amount for us. And then again, even when we put the second series in, it will be less than the current bond or debt that we have.
And this just builds capacity in those transmission lines that feed the
Correct.
communities?
It's primarily the transformers, but it's a reconductor of the line to river as well, are the big price components. And so in that agreement that was done back in 1989,
So when you say the transformers, right, the transformers feed, because it's the main transmission lines that pull into the city, and then each of our substations, we have our own transformers that go from there.
correct, these transformers are the 138 kV to 69s that aren't,
Okay, so they
none
step
of
it
them.
down to something that we can even bring into our
Exactly.
substations, okay?
Exactly. And none of these locations are even in Washington City. River's the one at the base of Four Master over by the dinosaur tracks. Skyline's
No,
up.
I get that, but when you're saying transformers, right, in my mind, I'm thinking it's a transformer that kicks it out into the neighborhoods.
No, this is further up the system. Yeah, so you just keep stepping down as you go.
So Rick, sorry.
Go ahead.
So I called you last weekend regarding power lines. Are these the same power lines that we discussed? I mean, who owns these power lines? Is it our
Well,
local entity?
UAMPS owns 2 of the 4 lines and 100% from Central to St. George. And then the other 2 lines were co-owners, UAMPS and Rocky Mountain.
UAMPS and Rocky Mountain.
But they operate all 4 of those lines.
And so they would have discretion over the lines if they had to shut them off, or
Correct.
would that be Utah Power or UAMPS and Utah Power that would make that decision?
Rocky Mountain solely.
Rocky Mountain solely could shut those power lines down if they ever felt like they needed to.
And it has nothing to do with load. What was the PSPS that was talked about last weekend? It's strictly a fire liability reduction method that's done. It's a recognized practice in the industry now, clear across the country. So it's not unique to Rocky Mountain.
That comes from the fires in California the last few years ago. Did it predate that?
No, the impetus was those fires, as well as PacifiCorp has had fires in Oregon that's nearly bankrupted the company, the claims. And so what they say is, well, if we have an extreme weather event, we'll just shut the power off, then we don't have to worry about starting a fire. Then nobody will blame us. So that's, so they're gonna err on
They
the.
don't want the liability, but they shut the power off and they create a lot of problems for everybody downstream.
Correct, but like I say, you saw Garcane do it, was it yesterday or
Today.
this morning? For fires over there by Bryce Canyon, so it's, whether you like it or not, that's an accepted utility practice now.
What is like the threshold for, is it like a certain wind speed? Where they
Wind,
turn them
temperature,
on?
and humidity are the primary ones. So anyway, this is a different animal here, but somewhat the same system.
Yeah.
But totally different issues, so.
So you're looking for an approval on this resolution?
Yes, and the other 3 cities will be doing they may have already done it, but, okay. yeah, the other cities all doing the same thing.
Mayor, I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, Councilman.
I'll make a motion, we approve the resolution adopting and amending to the transmission service agreement for the Central to St. George Transmission Project to authorize certain upgrades to the project, the issuance of bonds by UAMPS to finance such upgrades and related amendments and related matters.
Motion by Councilman Coates, second by Councilman Belliston. Roll call beginning with Councilmember Henderson.
Aye.
Coates.
Aye.
Ivy. Casperson.
Aye.
Belliston.
Aye.
That's approved unanimously, and I'll tell Tara to put you at the front of the agenda
Thank you.
next time. Thanks for hanging with us tonight. Item 10, report of officers from assigned committee. Councilman Belliston.
I don't have anything today.
Councilman Henderson.
Today, Mayor.
Councilman Coates.
No, not today.
Councilman Ivy.
Just one thing, legislative policy, the interim session. I have a handful of things here that were really interesting in the last interim session. They talked about a couple of things that I'm repeating myself, but they're just kind of amazing. Anyway, for the first time in Utah's history, the housing landscape has changed. Now 52% of Utah's growth is in migration and 48% is in-state births. So that kind of plays into the conversation going on fast and furious at the state and everywhere else on housing and how that affects housing and who's buying housing and who has the money to buy housing. And then legislators are looking to limit investors buying stock in Utah.
Housing stock?
Yeah, in housing stock. You know, they've got, Summit County has 32%, Uinta's 13%, and then Washington County's looking good at 0.8%. But these are just some of those big things that we can plan to see in this next legislative session and throughout the interim sessions. They all have to do with housing and how to affect the proper changes so that our folks here in Utah can have houses to live and to grow some generational wealth. But I thought those were a couple of key components that were very interesting.
Thank you, Councilman Ivy. I agree. Councilwoman Casperson.
I don't have anything, but I just wanted to take a minute to just thank Drew for his time. I feel like his experience is so helpful, and I was telling him last time I talked to him, it's so nice to have like someone you can just go to that knows everything, like memorizing the code. Just like, I don't even know how he does it. I can just ask him anything and he has all the answers in his brain. So we're gonna miss you.
I know it's late, don't be mad. I've asked Tess, I thought we were gonna be faster tonight. I'm really sorry. I know you've been sitting back there for a while. I've asked Tess to just come and give us an update on the 4th and the 24th. And then Jordan, do you want Jordan to lead out? Jordan, go first. Okay, Jordan's gonna come up and talk Cotton Days. And then Tess is gonna talk Independence Day and Pioneer Day.
I just need that. 2681. Okay. So, Cotton Days was the end of April. In May, I sent out a survey to residents to get their feedback and thoughts on Cotton Days. Why they're coming, why they're not coming, who's coming, etc. And so I'm going to run through this real quick because it's been a long meeting. I had AI do a Cotton Days in a revitalized downtown, and that is what AI came up with. The objective was just to gather information about residents' feelings towards Cotton Days and look for areas of improvement. The survey was open the whole month of May, and 120 residents responded and filled out the survey, which was 17 detailed questions. Half of the respondents attended Cotton Days and half did not. The age, a huge majority were 50 and older, and then 30 to 49 was about medium, and then not very many of the younger folks. Looking at how long they've lived in the city or in the county, The largest was 10+ years, but surprisingly, 35% were 3 to 5 years, which is, we've seen huge growth in the last 3 to 5 years. So a lot of our newer residents filled out this survey. And as just for information, the survey went out to our email newsletter list and also was circulated in some Facebook groups. If you did not attend Cotton Days, why didn't you? Most people just didn't know about it. Some were too busy, some were unsure what it was, some don't really feel like they have a connection to the history, and then some were out of town. But that didn't know about it is a little surprising to me. If you did attend, in which events did you participate? Our biggest ones are the parade and the vendors and activities in the park, followed by the Lions Club breakfast, car show, tractor pull, and then quite a few went to the George Washington Plaza kickoff. Not very many at the Fireside, Cotton Ball, or the concert in the park. Did you see or hear any marketing of Cotton Days before the event? Almost 41% did not see any marketing of Cotton Days before the event. If they did see or hear any marketing, it was the banners around town and social media posts, and then a large amount were word of mouth, but not very many through the chamber or through the city newsletter. If you attended Cotton Days, why did you attend? Most people attended for the parade. A lot of people, it's tradition, they always come, and then gave their kids something to do. If you attended Cotton Days, would you again in the future? Yes, 62%, 34% said it depends, and the full answer in the survey was it depends on what's being offered. And then only 4% said no, so that's good. Most people think it's a good mix of things to do for children and for adults, but as you can see, there were a good amount of people who thought it was too kid-friendly. And you'll see later on, I had some open-ended questions where they could answer their own thoughts. Most people are just happy that there's a place to gather with friends and family. That's the most typical response. A lot of people like that the city and leaders care about them. Some it gave them a greater respect for the history. A lot of people feel welcome, but I like that, you know, we often say we want our downtown to be a gathering place, and I think our residents feel that way as well. Was it worth your time? 70% said yes, 26% were unsure, and only about 5% said no. How pleased were you? Most were very pleased or somewhat pleased. So I think for the most part, people enjoy what they see or experience or feel at Cotton Days. How important is it for you to learn and connect with the history of the city? Somewhat important and very important was overwhelmingly the selection there. But there were still a segment that said it's not really important to them. So then this was some of the open-ended. What were some of your favorite parts of Cotton Days? You see a lot of tractor pull, car shows, GW Plaza, the pancake breakfast, parade, Heritage Hall, kids activities. So I think the biggest answers you can see on there are the parade, the car show, tractor pull, etc. But when I asked them to describe Cotton Days in one word, the number one response was outdated. So I think, you know, it is a lot of the same every year, and so I think that's a reasonable response for a lot of people. But I also liked that hometown, tradition, patriotic were some other very common responses, and the word community there as well. What would you like to experience at Cotton Days? Most of these answers are better marketing, you know, different entertainment, make the parade less commercial, more horses, wagons, and bands in the parade, more attendees, events that will draw more people, better food, a beer garden for adults, better floats in the parade, more adult activities, better marketing, better entertainment. As you can see, there are some themes here. And then some additional responses, better schedule events, get school marching bands, more inclusive of newer residents, better entertainment, more vendors, more adult interests, etc. So I think some takeaways. Number one, we need to do better at marketing, with 41% not even knowing what it was and not knowing about it, not seeing any marketing at all. I think that there's room for improvement there. We have money that we get from sponsorships, and that money rolls over year to year. It might be worth spending some more of that money on marketing, and marketing in different ways than just Facebook posts and banners at the park. I think if we want it to include more people, some of our newer residents, we need to find ways to reach them. I also think there's opportunity to reach younger crowds. As you could see, our older population is more likely to attend. Although we do see a lot of families at the parade, etc., I think we have segments of our population living elsewhere in the city, down in the fields, for example, that probably aren't as tuned in, or they just don't care, either one. So I've emailed all of this to you. Each of you should have this survey in your inbox, so you can take time to go through the slides and look at the data more in depth. The reason I did this is every year we meet as a Cotton Days committee, and now we have some data, some feedback from actual residents in the city that can help guide our decisions regarding Cotton Days in the future. My goal is just to, like I said, make it more well-known so that more of our residents can take part in it and learn the history of our city. We are a great community, very family-friendly community, and it would just be nice to see larger attendance segments of our population that aren't currently attending Cotton Days.
Can I just ask Jordan a question, Mayor? So you've kind of touched on it twice. I'm really zeroing in on more inclusive of newer residents. Was there any other data or information with that as to how we should do that or what we should do to bring that about?
Well, as you can see, some events are more popular than others. I think if we were to streamline some of the things that we do and focus more on, the parade, the activities in the park, the car show, some of the other things aren't really attracting attendees. So maybe we beef up our activities at the park. Maybe we have more of a farmer's market feel. Maybe we, bring in better entertainment, better music. One of the people said they felt bad because there were 50 people playing in the concert band, but only 15 there watching. So it's really sad when you get all these people together with their instruments and then there's no one there to even watch what's happening. So I think, just make people more aware of the entertainment options, bring in better entertainment, and then, beef up our marketing so that more people are aware of it even happening.
Suggestion, go to the elementary schools, hand out a coupon to all the kids for a free snow cone.
Oh,
You get 1,000 families will come out of the woodwork to come. Guaranteed.
That's a good idea.
It's like free tickets to the rodeo.
Council's making snow cones next year.
Any other thoughts or questions? Like I said, this survey results are in your inbox, so you can go through them. I know we're out of time.
Thank you, Jordan. That was a lot of work. Thank you for taking that initiative. Council, if you have additional thoughts on this, let me know. I'm happy to have that conversation offline whenever you want, and we'll try to continue to digest this data and see how we make it better every year.
One last thought. I know that with the redevelopment of our downtown, we won't have that dirt lot much longer. So, we need to start thinking now about what Cotton Days might look like 3 or 4 years from now. I know historically it's always been downtown, but is there somewhere more central in the city that in the future could accommodate larger crowds? Because Jeremy and I have had this conversation that with our parking and the space that we have, we want to attract more people, but can we currently accommodate if we were to double the attendees at Cotton Days, right? What would that look like? Especially losing the vacant dirt lot and the Nison's parking lot, et cetera.
Excellent. Thank you, Jordan. Tess, will you give us a rundown of what to expect with the 4th and the 24th?
So the 4th is not a city event, it's a Lions Club event.
Yes.
But I pulled up their flyer, so it's 7 a.m. breakfast, 8 a.m. music by the Nison Band, 9 a.m. Nison statue unveiling, 9:30 kids carnival and auction, and then 10 a.m. is the foot races, and then they have a lunch afterwards. And then on the 24th, it's very similar where the Lions Club does a breakfast, but the biggest difference is that we have a parade in the morning, and then we follow it up by children's games at the park, and then the foot races.
So do we sponsor the 24th then, or who sponsors Pioneer Day?
Yes, we do the 24th.
Okay, and Independence Day is sponsored by the Lions Club.
Yes.
How do we interact? How do we support?
So traditionally in the past, we have like waived permit fees for their event on the 4th, but other than that, there hasn't been much like staff support that I'm aware of from my department.
Can I ask just maybe a comment?
Yeah.
There's a lot of folks in this room that were born and raised here in Washington. What day was the biggest day of the year? The 4th of July in Washington. It started with, the night before, it started with the band going around town and waking you up.
Cannon in the morning.
I don't know, maybe I'm alone in this, but I just feel like that we can do better on the 4th of July. That's our Independence Day. It's the day that kind of set Washington aside, just like Veterans Day. But, the 24th is an important holiday. I agree it is. But it kind of affects all of us that has that ancestry. But I just wonder if the council would be interested in considering more of a presence for the 4th of July.
Like a more active role
on the 4th, and less on
bringing back some traditions or creating some new traditions. You're right. I mean, I remember sleeping outside the night before and being so excited. And I mean, it's still a great event, but how can we, It
was huge. It was.
So
make the 4th great again.
Love that.
Let me not throw cold water on your ideas, because I think it's wonderful. I think the 4th of July is fantastic. One of the challenges we have is they're so close to each other, and trying to get staff and all the work that it takes to put together both can be challenging. And then just chatting with Tess, the one thing we haven't talked about is that we do fireworks on the 24th of July, and we don't do any fireworks on the 4th. So, and I think we may be one of the only fireworks displays on the 24th. Is that correct? So there's just some things to look at, but I think it's a lot to ask our staff to do both those events within 3 weeks of each other. If we want them both to be huge.
We did 3 Ironman within 3 weeks of.
We did, and it caused some mutiny. But it takes a lot. These events do take a lot of staff time from all departments. I mean, all of our different departments put a lot of effort and time, especially leisure services and our event staff.
If we want to beef up the 24th. St. George does a good job on their side on the 4th.
That's what I was gonna say.
I look forward to going to.
Theirs is huge. And a lot of people in Washington go over there.
To go into that side.
It was, right?
Yeah.
They put all the resources into the 4th for the fireworks, and so we did the 24th, and
That's what it was traditionally, and then for Veterans Day and Patriots Day. But I'm just wondering though, are our residents do they really go to St. George? Are they really attending? Do you think so? Or could we do better by, I don't know, I just think our nation's birthday is.
I think it's great to look at both, but I agree with you, we should, but it's just like Beaver's huge for the 24th, but the 4th, no one's there. Nothing like it was, right? And I kind of consider us as Washington as the 24th is kind of our bigger holiday, and the 4th gets done by our neighbor, and that's okay. And trust me, very few people know where the boundary is, their address, right? But they're gonna go with the events, and
I'm so tired of people from St. George saying they live in Washington. It's like, stop, you live in St. George. I know you probably want to live in Washington.
We wanted you in Washington. We couldn't get the annexation done, but you know.
But
I
maybe
bet people would like to come to Washington to celebrate rather than going to St. George myself.
But maybe we don't do it as big as St. George, but we keep it kind of hometown on the 4th, and maybe just a little more city support and just kind of targeted traditions.
I'd rather do it on the 4th and let go of the 24th myself.
Me too.
We're our own city. We don't need to rely on St. George.
I agree.
In Washington City, we're proud of Washington City. We don't need to
I mean,
send
look at our
people.
logo.
Yes.
Let's have more conversation about this. I think
Last
it's good
comment,
feedback.
Mayor?
It doesn't even have to be the last comment.
So I recognize what Jeremy said, you know, a state holiday versus a federal holiday, and not both of them back to back. But, and I've already stated it, I don't want to be redundant, but 4th of July was the day of the year in Washington City that set us apart and made us our own entity. And we had people from St. George coming here. The races, you couldn't even, I mean, the races were the full width of the park almost. And I'm not trying to overstate it, only that I think that we've gone away from what foundationally made our city, even from 1863 on. The 4th was always, and the 24th is really kind of waned because the LDS Church really hasn't pushed it that much, unless I'm not understanding it right. It's kind of become a celebration of individual cities if they chose to do it, but it really wasn't supported by the church. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't celebrate it and appreciate it. It's just that I would really like to see us do a better job with the 4th. And then if people want to go to St. George, but those key elements that Mayor's talking about, I think we could do it without a lot of money and without a lot
The
of.
races are an awesome tradition. Like the
be there every year.
races. More thoughts, Tess and Jordan.
The only thought I have.
And speak right into that, Mike.
Sorry, I'm really bad at that.
You're not as bad as Councilman Belliston.
The only thought
Just
that I would
trying to- just
have
kidding.
is that if our venue is currently big enough to be as big as the event that you guys are wanting to host. Because it kind of runs into the same thing with Cotton Days, like can we host that many more people there? And then the only other thing is, so with Pioneer Day, how it's run right now, it is ran by the wards with more of a Pioneer Day theme where we don't allow any advertising, any outside vendors to come and sell anything. So there's also other options of if we want to look at changing that so it doesn't have such of that like kind of feel that you guys were talking about.
Is it typically the Washington stake? Have the other stakes gotten involved, or is it still just the old Washington stake?
I'm not super familiar which stake
Like,
it is. It's the one that Barry's in.
Because he left, I
Yes.
can tell you, Barry marshals the troops. And when Barry's not here, we may not even have a
Pioneer Day.
anymore because I think he kind of guilts,
Well, the
for lack of a better word, people into.
The parade is actually the biggest for the 24th out of all of our parades.
Yeah, that's the one where you get some of the wards and primaries, but it's the,
But it
it's
also, sorry,
interrupting on your point.
it also has the most amount of like outside people that come in too. It's not just the wards.
I like that it's not commercialized. And I think we just, I wrote a letter to like church leaders, and I can follow back up, like leading up again. But I think the 24th, if any, should be kind of the most self-sufficient, letting these committees, if you want to keep the holiday, keep it going. Whereas I think we could maybe push a little more resources to the 4th. That's just kind of what I'm thinking. But I don't know that we have to compete with St. George, but we can do our way and do it well. But the 24th, I think it's running well, right? I don't think there's a lot, for right now, but we could get more support probably from some of the congregations.
I just think, Mayor, the last thing I'd say is that I really think another element here that we need to consider is that our Lions Club is aging. And they're really not replenishing people that are retiring with younger folks to kind of carry this on. And, I know that they rely strongly on help. I know the Youth Council will be there on the 4th of July for some, for specific assignments to try to help keep that going. But I think we have to consider too that our Lions Club is not what it used to be, sadly. But if that's the case, my thought.
Council, further thoughts on this topic? I know it's getting late. Further thoughts, Tess? Bring back the cannon.
Oh wait, Councilman Coates up there.
Fire mission. We got a couple of artillerymen up here.
I just want to know where it landed, that's all I was looking for.
Jordan, you had something to add?
I was just gonna say, yeah, St. George's 4th is huge, but most of it is late afternoon, you go to the stadium, you watch the concert, and then they have the fireworks. So if we focused on the morning, doing morning events before
Parade,
it got too
breakfast,
hot.
and races.
Exactly.
Cannon.
They do have a parade. But I think the biggest draw is they have this year it's Brett Young, who's a huge country artist coming to perform at the stadium. So I don't think could compete with that, but I think we could hold our own in the morning with our own residents.
Especially if we know what we do it well, and just know our scope.
Yep.
And we could focus our parade on being patriotic rather than sometimes I feel like it is commercialized where it's just a bunch of advertisements for businesses where we could have it be, focused on some of our heritage, patriotism. We could make it like a big thing, really make it nice.
Let's be real, why do kids come to parades?
Candy.
But we can still make it that way with.
Yeah, but who brings it is the commercialized.
But you'll notice in that survey of Cotton Days, one of the biggest responses was the parade is too commercialized. Where are the horses, the marching bands, the less of the window salesmen and, a lot of businesses.
Just more authentic.
Exactly.
Parade,
Which
even
I
if it's
think 4th
smaller.
of July, yeah.
Jordan, do we utilize the community center at all for either of those celebrations?
Just for the fireworks.
Is that maybe something that we could consider too, Mayor, is maybe on the 4th, in the morning, and then maybe open up the community center for a minute and let people do a hot dog and then go to St. George in the afternoon or something? I mean, that's a beautiful facility that we might be able to utilize into this without creating a whole lot of extra work. I don't know.
Yeah, and where the Lions Club currently runs it, we probably ought to just kind of coordinate with them on some things, and maybe it's kind of how can we support and improve what, because you're right, they're getting older and it's a lot on them. This is good feedback. Well, this is good feedback. We'll keep this conversation going, and if you have additional comments, we can keep that conversation going. Thank you, guys. City manager report. You've got 2 hours.
I think I'll save my brief couple of items for the closed meeting.
We'll go to the next item 12, closed session. I'll call for motion to go to closed session for purchase, exchange, release of property and character or professional competence of an individual.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Councilman Ivey, second by Councilman Coates. All in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. We'll move into closed session. Thank you.
Did you hear me correctly?